conversation because this is the kind of information people need to hear. We're on the conscious mindset, and I'm your main man, SBD, sitting here with Secunda and the amazing and truly prolific lady that she is. And as she's straightening out her hair, I know that everything is going to work out and it's all going to be fair. And we're going to get it right and tight because we have a living legend in our presence, Secunda. Before I get to this living legend, and I do repeat, living legend in our presence, I want to ask you, dear sister, how you doing this wonderful and beautiful evening?
I'm doing, anytime I have the opportunity. So Sundays, I have opportunities to be in Black spaces digitally,
Right.
uh, in conversation and watching different people, listening to people that I love, listening to people that care about Black people. So even in the midst of all the things that are happening, I'm drenched in like Black love and Black creativity and black noise talking and Black laughter. So I'm good.
That's powerful.
I'm
That's powerful.
good.
I'm glad you said that. That's good to hear that you're good because I know it's a lot of folk out there feeling the angst and the anger and all of
Yeah.
things going on in society, and it's always good to know that you can still, in spite of the difficulties and challenges we face, you can still find a way to be positive and to feel like there's something to be hopeful for, and faith in that things will all work out. So I'm happy to hear that you're in good spirits, and I know seeing this brother, that's on the screen as well, it always puts a smile on my face. I mean, he is without any other superlatives, he is a phenomenal phenomenality of magnificence, and he does a brilliant job. I had the privilege, pleasure, and honor to see him put in some major work right at City Hall a few days ago. And it was really inspiring and motivating. And it was really indicative of what leadership is. It's stepping out in the front and doing things that most people would think was unconventional, and doing it in a way in which motivates simple folk like myself to think outside of our box. And you definitely have always edified that, and I want to salute you as well, Secunda, for being a real community organizer. You say you don't like titles, but I want to give you the title of a real community organizer and a true queen. So it's a privilege, pleasure, and honor to have both of you on the conscious mindset. And I got to go to my brother Ashton. How are you doing this wonderful and beautiful evening, dear brother?
I'm good. Just trying to make sure people are getting out of jail, making sure that they have food and access to a ride home. It's been a stressful weekend for multiple reasons, mainly because I've been kind of trapped inside trying to recover from the heat exhaustion I had on Friday.
Wow.
And it was just painful to have to just watch and couldn't do anything and be with the people. But the thing about how I'm feeling right now is it's important because me and Secunda started together, really, to be honest with you.
Wow.
We did.
And I'll always have love for Secunda because the people like her, they won, and she knows, and I know, we both know that what's happening right now is nothing new, and there may be a lot of new activists out there, right? But we didn't have what we're doing for people now, which is our organizations and our platforms are growing large enough to do front-facing work and background work, and that looks like
That's true.
sitting home, even though I'm, having moments where my body hurts or something like that from, being dehydrated, coordinate a bail fund, coordinate, response, make sure there are street medics, make sure there are legal observers, make sure you have attorneys, right? Because when we started, we didn't have that. We do now. And it's important, to make sure that people understand that we're not just doing this just to do this. This takes a sacrifice.
Yeah.
It takes a financial toll, a social toll. You never know. So that's what I'm feeling this weekend.
I'm glad you went there, brother, because a lot of times we just see the rah, 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 people, black this and, all of this and all of that. We see all of these gargantuous movements and these, extracurricular activities in terms of conversations and engagements and interactions. And we don't get the opportunity to see the realities that activists face and how they can be in their own space and have to deal with their own stuff on top of a movement that is so taxing and so engulfing and requires so much. I appreciate your honesty and your candor. I would like to ask you this, Brother Ashton, please to kind of jump in whenever you feel the need to. How are you able to compartmentalize? I mean, it was thousands and thousands of people at that march, at that protest, and I know you've been a part of numerous protests in your career. How have you been able to compartmentalize dealing with your life, dealing with just being a Black man in America? And then also, dealing with the fact that, you have to, deal with the strife that comes with orientation and then coming with the strife of dealing with police brutality and racial profiling. How are you able to compartmentalize all of this and live your life like a normal human being?
So because I learned a long time ago what systems of oppressions are and how they work. What you just described in a nutshell was how am I doing? You're asking me how am I dealing with the systems of oppression of being a Black man who happens to be gay, who's living with HIV, which means I have a compromised immune system. It's like you're getting punched by everybody. And for me, right? Because I've been called a fag and I've been called a nigger. And I've been called that by people who look like me and by people who don't look like me. Right. And when you think about the context of a Pamela Turner, a Breonna Taylor, a Corinne Gaines, how Black women are tone policed, how Black women are told they should have been acting or how they need to comply and that's respectability politics. Right. That's silencing people with those oppressions. So when you talk about how those oppressions look, you may not feel like it, but you may be dealing with the oppression in many ways. For example, we keep seeing instances of white people using their privilege and their automatic weapons to take over state capitals, while today the National Guard in multiple states, including Texas, are being mobilized to state capitals and other areas in different cities, and you see a police state showing itself.
Yep.
This is something we have been asking for a long time. Show us yourself, because we will expose you. And they got exposed when George Floyd laid on the ground for 8 minutes and some seconds and was murdered by 4 cops. I've been in the grand jury rooms with the family. Secunda has too.
Yeah.
And we sat there with them families at Harris County Criminal Justice Complex, feeling the pain in the room, waiting for people who are behind in the office, looking out the window, making faces at us, staff, looking at us like we didn't belong because we were there to support people who felt alone, because we can never know what it feels like to lose a loved one until we have it. But there's still the empathy there. You look like me. You my skin folk.
That's
if
right.
you're hurting, I'm hurting. And not everybody feels that way in our community, and I understand that. But all I can do is focus on me and what I feel like I can provide or contribute to community affairs, especially when it comes to Black folk. Yeah. So when we're talking about all those things and that oppression, your kid, even with the laws in place since the 60s, is still getting a crappy education. Our healthcare is trash. More and more people who look like us are affected by COVID-19. Right. Terrible government response. Terrible. You know what I mean? Yeah. So when you think about how that looks for people who only have dollar stores, gas stations, and corner stores to go to for food that is not good for them, while people accuse them of being obese on purpose and using obesity and all these other things and our Blackness to deem us as criminals and to say that this is bad. Our media messaging on TV shows, on the news media, in our digital print, everything that we see in some way, shape, or form depicts me or Secunda in a way that says that we are bad innately, that we are somehow evil, and that when we walk into an ATM in our neighborhood that's being gentrified and getting passed up by Karen and her cell phone because she just moved in, and I might have been in that neighborhood for 30 years, but she thinks I'm a stranger. She thinks I'm a trespasser. I don't belong here. That's colonization mindset. That's white GAZE, white gaze, because they feel like they should be able to have the space to go anywhere. No, you can't touch my hair. No, you can't feel my beard. No, you can't grab my ass because you think I'm fine. Your black dingling fetish is not my problem, right? Because you white people and non-black people of color tend to, okay, thank you for entertaining us, right? But when it comes down to the nitty-gritty of actually showing up when it ain't no protest going on, you can't. Where were you 6 months ago before Friday? And where are you gonna be 6 months from now? Because I've seen people come and go. They come in all rowdy, and then they're gone. They might be a year and they're gone. We need consistency. So I'll never shut up. And I know my sister will never shut up because there is a need, and people like Secunda and all the other activists out there, including myself, know that consistency breeds trust. I'm not going to say anything that I cannot verify. I'm not going to talk about anything I don't know about. I'd rather go learn it or have somebody explain it to me or Google it on my own time, like I tell white people, because folks don't understand. Black people get put in a situation where they're constantly being put to task and provide labor. Why should I sit in front of you, a crowd of 10 people, to teach you how not to be so damn white? Pay me. You taking me from my community? They keep asking how community activists get paid. We don't get paid for going out there on the streets and doing bail funds and all these other things. We take odd jobs. We do different things. When I travel, if I get invited to a school to speak, they pay me a fee, right? I have to eat.
Right.
But at the same time, when you think about the Sean Kings of the world who take advantage of all these things and they exploit, and people of the world in their pointed, shiny shoes and their double-breasted suits from 20 years ago saying the same shit over and over again. It's ridiculous. I'm not here for this shit.
That's powerful. I'm glad you said that. We have to touch on that. Secunda, I'd love to get your thoughts because he mentioned Breonna Taylor. He mentioned Sister Gaines. He mentioned all of these sisters that have been marginalized by the system and then even marginalized by even people of color, especially Black people, because of the denigration. And I love, Ashton, how you brought up orientation. And I just want to say, as a man, you know, I have to do a better job of protecting all forms and facets of African American life, because we can no longer separate or differentiate ourselves based on things that don't determine life or death. Life or death is at hand. And we have to understand and elevate beyond a lot of this sectarianism and tribalism and foolishness that's going to get us killed and destroyed, because only united we stand, divided we fall. So I'd love to hear you interject some of your thoughts on what the dear brother just said.
Yeah, he said it. I want to talk about he mentioned Sean King. And you didn't say this, but I think it's important to mention the danger, the trauma that happens when people parade and create a life for themselves based on Black death, right? And when you do a particular type of work, but you don't do it in walking with the families that you are, so say, helping. For example, Sean King started some shit in Houston. There are people in jail right now. There are Black men who were arrested.
We don't even know if they're guilty.
Exactly. I mean, you know, people talk about Sean King, and you know, when you hear one Black organization after the other, one Black woman after another, one Black man after another, hundreds of Black women say that Sean King has stolen money. Sean King has stolen even ideas, right? Without giving credit, right? Sean King has, I asked him to, you know, help my family, but he used videos and pictures in a way that was not like, I didn't agree to that. I didn't want my child's life to be used in that particular way, right? That's a problem. That person is a problem.
And
right?
these are all facts. These are all facts you're saying right now.
Yeah, these are, I mean, there are so many. There was an article that came out recently.
Right.
I think in the New York, probably last week, which is the latest, but there are lists, there are Twitter like tweets, there are so many accounts. There are people from Houston. I think Dr. Ronnie Byrne is the first person that I seen in Houston who was like, and I ain't gonna lie, man, I did not want to stop sharing his stuff because I was like, at the time I was like, well, sharing this information, he's a hot mess. Of course, I believed her. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
But I just want to talk about the psyche of Black people entering into this stuff. For me, it was like, but if we don't share it, people, are paying attention to this, then like we can't help. Like, you know what I mean? Like what
Right.
happens
Right.
when he has this particular platform? But Sean King is like the Democrats. It's in a very abusive relationship. And
Thank
it
you.
takes some of us longer than others to recognize when we're being abused, when we're being used, right? Sometimes some of us don't believe other people, and some of us believe other people, but we think that the cost may be worth it for something else. But believe you me, as my nanny would say, believe me, Shad, in times you're gonna see that wasn't worth it. That this person causes more harm than good,
Good. Yeah.
right? And anytime we have individuals that center themselves in terms of activism, we are all leaders. Ashton said, we all started out together. Black people can lead themselves, right? We all have different walks in this thing. We all have different um areas that we need to serve. We all pick up, how like you at your mama house, or like the way you raised, house need to get clean. Everybody gonna do something. Ain't no such
Everybody
thing as
works.
a
Everybody works.
man. If something need to be done in the yard, and it's some girl, whoever there, get the yard done. I don't care. If some dishes need to be washed, you need to wash a dish, brother. Pick up a broom. Everybody has work to do so that we can get our house in order. And the more of us that work, now sometimes, it seems as maybe some people are better at pointing out what needs to be done and getting it organized. And sometimes some people are better at actually doing it. And sometimes there's not a lot of hands on deck, right? So you'll get one person that's doing it. But when that happens too often, then that person you become wore out. We went through it. Like, we went through a particular time where everything felt like an emergency as a person who's doing this work. And you feel like you got to run to this, you run to that. I found that it wasn't healthy for me. I was introduced to a book by a sister by the name of Andrea Marie Brown called Emergent Strategies. And that book to me was so full of things in my spirit that I knew that were true, that talked about decentralized leadership in a way that was like the way that spirit created nature,
Mm.
right? How do we organize ourselves? Well, how is nature organized? There's no one telling nature what to do or how to do it. But once we come together, we submit, we're dedicated to survival, right? And we
Right.
understand the importance of everyone's task. We make it. Now I want to go back to what you asked, or what you presented with, as far as what is women's relationship with this movement. We're talking about our sister Breonna Taylor, um, the way she was murdered, right? Um, and we didn't hear a lot about her. I think that's two reasons. One of the reasons is something that I barely touched on just a minute ago, which is like this obsession with Black death as
Mm.
entertainment, in a
Mm.
way that it was during lynching times, right? When people came and they saw it and they gave things to their kids, not us. We were horrified. Now
Right.
I imagine what people went through, Black people at that time who were forced to see those things, right?
Right.
And had to live amongst white people in a way that we don't, right? I can run over somebody right now if I mean, they could too, but I can get bail and get me a lawyer. Better get the hell out of my way. There was a different type of movement at that time, right? So imagine the trauma that we feel by watching a video,
Mm.
by hearing, by barely seeing a photo. what our ancestors endured. At the same time, they're working in the homes or working on the farms, right, of these white people, or working in the stores of white folks, right, who just left the picnic, who just left the lynching, or even if they didn't go, you know, they're saying, they're explaining, just like people are doing right now on Facebook's, why people deserved it. So you have two things happening. You have people not paying attention to Breonna because it's not consumed. This is America, right? Her death can't be consumed in a way that feeds this low, dark space, you know, that human beings have, right? Or even with us, because we Black people, let me take that back a little bit. Breonna Taylor's death, because it is not, am I saying her name right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. Because it has not been videoed in a way that Brother George's was, right?
Right.
It can't be consumed. So on one hand, you have us, who human beings who are numb to it, right? You have another thing happening where it's not as important because we can't see it, right? I can't get off on it, right? White folks, right? And other people.
Right.
I can't get off on it.
Right.
And then you have this, how we treat Black women in our community. And I say we because this way that men are treated, it don't just come from Black men, it's Black women too, right? We are trained even in ourselves. I was telling you earlier, Cedric, that when Sandra Bland was murdered, and we were at that we were going to that Waller County.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Ashton, remember, we were going to Waller County, and we used to have these conversations while we're standing in front of this jail in the heat. And one of the things that came to my mind was that, well, you know what? This whole time I've always been concerned about what's happening to Black men, but I know the code. I know my mama taught me that if a police officer comes behind me and it's dark, right?
I guess the phone kind of slowed down, but when she comes back, we'll let her finish. Go ahead. Brother Ashton, I want to ask. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
okay. Like you don't stop. Like you do not stop for a police officer, because that can be the death of you. Right? You have to continue to move, Black woman. Your life is you in the same position of Black men, but I've been trained to look out for them, because don't get me wrong, like there is I won't not acknowledge this physical fear, right, that people have of Black men, this lie, right? I don't know where that comes from, but there's also this hate for Blackness, right? So it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, right? Your existence is a problem. So a Black woman who doesn't necessarily stay in her place, right? Then there's a problem. So and oftentimes when there is support for Black women, now we have, like, in the larger community, where white folks, Black men have to be a certain way, right? Like the bird watcher. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay. Like the bird watcher, he was acceptable. Brother went to Harvard. No shade to the brother, like, doing his thing. But like, oh yeah. Oh no, he didn't deserve it, right? But another Black man may not. Hey, he may have deserved to be treated a particular way because his pants sag. He got a grill, right? So you have that in the outside of Black community, right? Or you may even have it with Black bourgeoisie folks. But in the Black community as a whole, even down to the hood, right? To where I'm from, right? Even in the nitty gritty, even in the countries, even in the small towns of cities where there is not necessarily, where the socioeconomic, folks struggling. Let me just put it easy. That's where I can say it. I'm trying to think. You still have men with grills in their mouth. The very men who will be discriminated against, who will look at a Black woman and say, hey, she was too rough. She should have did this. Look how she was talking.
Yeah.
She's not worthy. So you have a larger space of, hate or I don't know what you call it. I was raised a Christian, so I use these Christian terms, but there's no mercy for this woman. There's no empathy, right, for their struggle, even from people who walk the very same struggle. I don't want to be too hard on Black people today because we go through enough. So, I just want to acknowledge.
But I think this is now the time where everybody's focused, everybody's concentration. Sports hadn't started yet. We don't have the same distractions. We need to deal with these real things because we are being marginalized by white people, and then we are marginalizing ourselves with oppression.
We are.
And I know there are many people who have issue with the straight Black man, because the straight Black man many times is as oppressive as any white man.
Yeah.
In terms of how he treats his women, because in public he's got his fist up and he's saying all this Black power revolutionary things, and he's beating up on his woman, or doing things that are just mantling the family and the structure that exists. And then at the same time, he's being very homophobic and all of these other things that denigrate and break down the foundation of our community. And I want to go back to you, Ashton, because I want to give you spotlight. You have been one of the only people who have talked about here in this city and other cities how trans individuals are being killed, and no one's talking about it.
That's
a Black man was murdered.
Black lives are being killed. Go ahead.
A Black trans man was murdered last week, and nobody's talking about it. Last week, a Black trans man in Florida was murdered. Last week. Same time as George Floyd. So when we're talking about who is seen, well, here's the thing. When we took on the white GAZE that I brought up earlier, white gaze, we're talking about how we adopt and emulate what white men gave to us through the process of slavery and subsequently through capitalism, about how we should appear, what schools we should go to. I mean, there's nothing wrong with going to a HBCU. There's also nothing wrong with going to Harvard. But personally, when I think about what Secunda said, and just in general, we have to know that these things are the reason why the situation is the way it is. If you got to tell me I have to speak with a certain inflection, that I have to walk a certain way, that I have to dress a certain way, you're buying into a system of white supremacy and oppression that was given to you by your fucking slave masters. Excuse my French. But it's like, people don't understand that because they got some Black folk out there, they got their bag. And you know what? Sure, get your bag, do what you're going to do. But don't come telling people how to be angry. Don't come telling people about how to talk to folks, right? And when you're telling people to go vote, are you telling them to hold folks accountable that they're telling them to vote for? Because you're telling people to vote and you hear folks in the crowd saying, I don't know who to vote for, because you know that the Democrats nor the Republicans don't do enough outreach in the Black communities. Don't. They won't step foot. Beto O'Rourke could have beat Ted Cruz if he had just Blackwall third ward a few times. There's at least 200,000 votes in third ward alone.
That's right.
City that did not mobilize for him and undervoted, and didn't vote in his race because he did not talk to them. Wow. Because we are tired of people telling us, oh, well, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. Don't tell some. When I ran for office, I did not tell people what I was going to do. I told people what I want to do. There's a difference between what you're going to do and what you want to do, because we know that regardless of how we run through these systems of oppression, we're within it, no matter how you shape it or describe it. But when you recognize it and you know what to call it, you know how to survive in it. So we've been in a state for 400 years of coming up with little mechanisms to cope with everything that we have to deal with over time. And that trauma has been passed down through our DNA.
Right.
We have that ancestral memory of what's going on. And we know when someone is being hostile towards us, no matter how much of a smile they have on their face.
That's right.
How much they are welcoming and appear to be your friend, they are not. And when you think about how we conflate things, and I was talking about this earlier with some friends about Kwame Ture or Stokely Carmichael, which was his name. He kind of talked about integration and different things. And I keep thinking, integration and civil rights honestly was really for those laws were for to tell white people what they can't do. It was never about we needed to move in their neighborhoods and assimilate to their way of life. Because when you think about it, like I think this is the second year of the Tulsa. I'm not second year, but the anniversary of the Tulsa fire. And when you think about that, and you think about towns that have literally been burned to the ground because Black people had $1 more than the white people in a town adjacent to them, it's because we are seen as less than human. We are not supposed to do better than them, right? They can walk around and say they'll donate to your Cash App, but they want you to explain how all these things go. And that's intellectual laziness. It is not our job to do the labor to educate white folk and non-Black POC about who the hell we are. We're presenting to you as we are. So why do you need to know about how we feel when you can see if it had happened to you, how you would feel? If there's no remorse and you can't feel anything from what you saw that happened to George Floyd or any other Black American citizen, you are part of the problem. And it's dangerous, bro. Because when I think about, I kept listening to people were getting my ear on Friday, and I kept thinking to myself, I've been doing this for years now. I've been an activist since I was in New Orleans in 1999, 14, 15 years old, helping to start the first Gay Straight Alliance in a high school ever in the city of New Orleans, a predominantly Black city that is known for its large LGBT population in the Black community, but very homophobic. And so when you think about how people always ask me, Ashton, how can you fight for them? Did you see what he called you? Don't that make you angry? No, I'm not just fighting for them. I'm fighting for the mother who needs Pampers, because she got laid off from work for her children because of this damn pandemic. I'm fighting because people need face masks that we were told we didn't need in the middle of a pandemic. I'm fighting because people get accosted going to a Walmart with their face mask on and have to justify why they want a gallon of milk. They was treating us like we was rioters and destroying shit before we even started. So if I keep telling people, you agitate us. When you agitate us, we react in kind. And just like I told KHO you earlier today, I'm not going to say that I disparage or that I don't condone what's happening when they're destroying a police car or they're blowing out a business. They have insurance. The police is protected by the state. They got money on top of money. HPD probably got a tank sitting up in their headquarters right now because under Barack Obama, the Homeland Security Administration through the Patriot Act militarized the police. Right. We are in a police state. So you think about that for a second.
And I want to.
Can we talk?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can we talk about the police? Can we talk about our city in particular?
Yes.
That's where we were going. Because
with HPD, just to add, with HPD, I'm thinking about how they're showing these optics of Art Acevedo getting hugs from people who ain't been on the scene, or how Art Acevedo was walking in the crowd when people don't really know. They tried to get me to make people to march back to this Discovery Green. I never coordinate with HPD. Because what I needed to do for Friday was call City of Houston and say, listen, we're marching down this path. We're going to be in this particular area so that you don't send people in to harass us. Because everything up to the steps of City Hall is public property. Right. I don't need permission to show up. They show up everywhere we go because they automatically treat us as if we're going to do something violent. And so when people react to being fired at by rubber bullets and enduring tear gas, what do you think they're going to do? I throw the canister back too. You hit me, I'm going to pop the fuck out of you. It does not matter. Because at the end of the day, people like Adrian Medeiros, who was going home.
Yeah.
Right. And I knew him a little bit. You know what I mean? Like I used to see him around, like he was cool people. And when I saw that, it didn't register to me that it was him because it was so unreal that it was him in that moment. And I'm thinking to myself, you said that he didn't pass the sobriety test, but he chased the officer around the car. And so if I walk in a straight line, how do you get chased behind a car, and you still need to deploy your arm, your sidearm, because he has your taser, and the taser safety was still on.
It's crazy.
So think
Yeah.
about how we talking about folk when they talking about, oh well, he wrote a bad check to Target. Who writes checks to Target? And when did any police department for that matter get proxy a warrant to chase somebody down in the middle of the street behind a bad check? That's the same.
Exactly. And I want to make reference to Adrian Medeiros, and can you hear me, Ashton?
Yeah.
Okay. And the many other folks who have been who died, who lost their life, who was murdered due to police violence, right here in Houston within this last month while we were in a pandemic. And art display of was that solidarity.
Right.
That's not solidarity. That's what you call good public relations.
Right.
If you
Relate.
look around, okay, if you look around, it's free publicity. It is a way to keep y'all calm, and not only keep you calm so that you won't blow stuff and burn stuff up, yes, but also so that you won't hold this city accountable for the deaths, the 8 deaths. And I want to mention some people by name if I can right now, because I need for your, oh, where I'm at. Okay, I'm tripping.
You could.
Okay. Some of these people in the newspaper, their names weren't even listed, right? And I think I made sure to take down all the names on maybe the 28th or something like that. But by the 29th, there were two more added. And then they shot their own police, which was friendly fire, and then I think somebody else last
Right.
night. So this is old, right? But I want to mention Nicholas Chavez, who
Yep.
family called because he was threatening to prevent suicide. Nicholas Chavez, a Latino brother. I don't know if he was Afro Latino or what, but I know it's a Latino brother. And he had recently got out of jail, so we don't know what happened, why he was in the state he was in, but we know that his family thought by calling the police they could save his life, and instead he was murdered. We also have another person who was killed on Chadwick. I do not have their name, on April 27th. We
They
have
didn't.
say that again, brother.
They didn't release it. There's two
They didn't
names that.
release the name, right? We have Adrian Medeiros, who was killed on May the 8th. And we have, like you said, two or three other brothers. But in the past, we had Jordan Baker, we had Alva Brazil, we had
Yeah.
Omar Ventura, we had so many other people. We had two people in Greenspoint. The city of Houston has not been held accountable one time for the lives of these people. The mother of Jordan Baker
Right.
recently received a
That hurt.
civil suit, right?
That
that
hurt so
that
much.
that hurt. That was her. She lost her only son to uh, a police officer. The city never held him accountable. This city has never held anybody accountable, and I don't want to hear y'all tell me about voting, right?
Right.
Because we voted. Not only did we vote, we got other people out. There was the buy run campaign that many of us on this line was a part of, including the city of Houston. There was a Ron Gone. I'm sorry. There was a Buy
Mhm.
Devin campaign that we organized. Everybody on this line, and of course, the folks in the city of Houston. There was let's teach us our folks and our family about judges, how we get that out. The city of Houston, Black Houston, y'all did such a good job. Y'all showed up. Y'all voted. Guess what? We still being locked up, right? We've done everything that they tell you to do. Organize, vote, support Black business. I remember Black people was in droves supporting Black banks, right? I'm with the
Right.
Black bank, right? But that doesn't mean that the Black bank, I'm with the Black bank just because I got tired of, having to go through what I go through when I deal with a white bank, because I'm self-employed, I'm an activist. Money comes different for me, right?
Right.
So, might get a check that might, it might be 3 months salary, right? But if you come in there with a check like that, folks think, it's something. You know what I mean? This self-employment income, right? And you can't. And I got tired of dealing with the shit, but that doesn't mean that I can go to the black bank and say, "Hey," because I know people who try to do it, who focus more on black economics, right? And they were very disappointed about what came out of it. But come to find out, black banks don't have as much power as we thought they had, right? So I just want to, for people who are saying just vote, and for people who are giving our chief the mic, no.
Right.
Wow.
No, do
Right.
not give any politician. Do not give any politician that supports you. Do not give any politician that you like. No politician that goes to your church. No politician that is your brother-in-law. The mic when you organizing for the people. And if that politician loves you, cares about the people, because the brother or the sister knows the power of the mic, right? They will respect you. That's the only way you can hold them accountable. We want to see something done. One of the things that I'm encouraging black organizations all over the nation, particularly the movement for Black Lives, are saying, and we have been saying, I'm not in the movement for Black Lives, I'm just saying we as in black people have been saying, let's defund the police department. How would it look for us to take some of those fundings to organize around, if we're spending so much money arresting people, arresting the same people, arresting people that are mentally like not in a good mental place, who are homeless, who are black, who are on the streets. We spending all that money arresting them. What would it look to create spaces where people will have a place to stay, where they have access to good medical care, right? What would it look like to in our schools, instead of having police forces, to have counselors, to have, I don't know what people need. Let people decide what they need in their schools.
Exactly.
Or let the homeless people and people with mental health issues, they know what they need. Each of us, we know what we need, but you know what I know we don't need? We don't need our tax dollars going to arts and arts team. We don't need to go into the sheriff or the Houston Police Department. You have not done us any favors. Black people are the ones getting pulled over. White folks, Latino folks, Asian folks in this city, because it's a very multicultural city, everybody use dope. Everybody sell dope. Everybody commit the same type of laws. You all know it. But we're the only people that pay for it. And let me tell you about what happens when people get a record and they go to jail. You cannot work, right? They say go to school, get an education. A black person with an education, oftentimes, even one with a graduate degree, is likely to earn the same amount as a white person with a high school diploma, right?
Yeah, I want to jump in real quick,
Okay.
and Brother Ashton, and I appreciate your comments. I don't want to cut you off.
No, that's okay. I've been talking for a minute.
Because you brought up so much, and I want to make sure that we contextualize it in a way in which people understand that it's beautiful what you're saying, and it's so true and it's so apropos. And I want to go back to make sure that people understand that many of the activists are being marginalized, and they're being codified or talked about as terrorists. It's being viewed as a federal crime. We're hearing if they loot, shoot, and all of those things that you mentioned about just dealing with life, Secunda, and how difficult it is to be an activist. Now you have to worry about if you go in a protest, you could literally be shot down. And that's not an order from a racist police chief. That's from the president of the United States. That's from the commander in chief saying, if you loot, we shoot. And that's from a segregationist, a Miami police chief in the 60s that said that when there was civil unrest because of the misappropriations and the deplorable activities of the police and the governmental agencies. So I want to go to Ashton first and say, to you, dear brother, thank you for putting your life on the line for real, not only with the coronavirus and all of the other things associated with the pandemic, but just going out in public and protesting for Black people, unlike those who did it in Michigan when the president said, liberate Michigan, liberate Minnesota. Unlike that. But for those who are fighting for George and fighting for the countless other brothers. And thank you, Secunda, for naming the nameless that we don't even get sometimes an opportunity to hear about. But can you talk about how we got to be very careful and not let those that want to stop progress to label the criminal the victor, or the one that's the good guy, and to label the real good guy as the criminal?
So again, like I said earlier, our blackness is seen as criminal. So it's automatic. It's an automatic strike. It promotes the idea that we are aggressive, that we hurt people, that we're capable of violence, and that's all we are, that we're less than human. And in reality, what I see, from the videos that I've seen so far from the people who we've been trying to provide assistance to as they've been released, is this is one black guy. I'm not going to name him, but he had a broken pinky, a hernia, and a black eye. And that was done to him by HPD during this weekend in Houston. There were people off of GP for just walking downtown last night. And Janie Torres, who is an ally in the Latino community who experienced police brutality in her family too, she lost a loved one, was arrested last night. And we got it on video. Like, she was doing her live and they just snatched them up and they were violent. Like, you see people being peaceful and they're just being aggressive. You don't need 40 dump trucks. You don't need the National Guard. You don't need the SWAT officers dressed up in their full gear coming from other cities to come to Houston, because the situation never warranted it. You are already creating a situation that is a powder keg of their own making, right?
That's right.
Of the fact that it's black people protesting. Off of the fact that we're just simply saying, stop fucking killing us.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not an ask, it's not a plea, it's a damn demand. And because they don't like that, I'll never forget when I was working at Costco in sales, and I was at the returns counter about to do a membership or something for this white woman, and Barack Obama had just won office. And I said something very polite to her, and she said something, "Oh, you think you good because you one of them Obama people, huh?" And I almost jumped over that counter. Because the New Orleans in me don't like white people like that. I know what white people in Louisiana are like.
No, they don't.
So here's the thing. It took me a long time to get this calm. It has taken me a very long time because I was always in a state of anger and agitation, because once you learn how to name something, you know how to identify it right away, and it pisses you off every single time until you find a way to compartmentalize that. And then the other thing about it is this: when you see them lining up with the constables and all these other things, why do you need that kind of presence? And why isn't Mayor Turner stepping up instead of having these little mini press conferences and responses and respectability politics events where you letting Chief Finna speak and they sharing all this stuff? It seems like through this whole thing that we saw the media make it look like the city government and their police agencies are cooperating with protesters and are on the side of the protesters, when we know that's a damn lie. Not if you're arresting people for simply being out on the street, walking and recording and protesting in their First Amendment speech. It's wrong. And that's a black man. That same black man, Sylvester Turner, is sitting there talking about, I want to wait and see what the Confederate monuments. Well, after he said that, a white man in Rice University area decided to buy bombs because he wanted to blow up that little Confederate statue by the medical center.
What?
Right? And they want to call us black identity extremists when they won't even go after the real white supremacists, the 150 plus organizations that are white nationalists, openly racist, incels who live right here in this city. Y'all talking about these people coming in from out of town and agitate? No, it's the people in your own backyard. And like Secunda said, just like within the black community, we in Houston and in our own communities have to come to terms. Like, what's up, bro, Jerry? Like, even when me and Jerry had disagreements, me and Jerry always talk. And I answer the phone when he called me. You know why? Because if something happened, at least he showed the hell up. You know what I'm saying? So my thing is, when you think about the people who show up And the people who keep calling things out, all of us on this video chat right now literally will call crazy, hard to work with, always angry, all these things. And now those same people who was calling us all those things are the first people they call, because they know we are not afraid to do what they won't do.
That's right.
Because when you look away, you're being silent, and silence equals death. And Black people have been dying for too damn long. How long has it been since we've seen a large amount of people die from Black people die from natural causes? Yeah, I recognize not that, in this country of almost a half billion people, 336 million, that cause of death is rarely natural causes anymore. But when you go to the hospital and you're a Black woman and you're telling the doctor that you're not feeling right while you're giving birth to a child, and they don't listen to you because Black people have a higher pain threshold, right? Because we're seen less than human, right? So this is what we're talking about when we're protesting. You call out the sisters of oppression that empower the police to be what they are, because the state protects the police and the police protects the state, because they are one and the damn same. Our institutions, when we say systemic institutional racism, we're talking about your judicial system, your city council members, your commissioners court. Everybody who is elected by office has the power within each of their office to make a vote that can change the lives of a bunch of people. Our excavator ran around denigrating bail reform and conflating it with felony reform that we don't even have yet, saying that they're releasing one of the men that got murdered. I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but was a Republican judge named Herb Ritchie that released that man. And when he was released to a mental health institution, highlighting the fact that Harris County Jail is constantly and continually used as the mental health facility as opposed to providing help to people. That's what this shit is. And then when you think about when he got released to that mental health facility and how that mental health facility dropped a dime and the 80-year-old white woman got murdered, right? Never mind the fact that that man was in mental health crisis. Never mind that a Black man in Dallas, after he shot at police officers in 2016, got blown up, but Dylan Roof got a fucking whopper. This is what we're talking about here. Right. And excuse me if I'm saying so amped up, but it pisses me off in real time, because people don't understand that that compilation, that memory is still there. I remember, because I call that Hell Week, when Philando Castile was murdered, when Alton Sterling was murdered, Elva Brazil was murdered. That night, a white man had weapons and shot 3 HPD officers and lived to tell his story, while Elva Brazil lay for hours on the ground because he had the audacity to ride up Cullinan Ward looking for his horse.
That's right.
So don't tell me about how they think about these things, because there was another incident in one of the instances where a white man just recently in this last month, rode around to 3 different locations in Houston and shot multiple people, killed them. He is alive. Okay, so it's never about just policing. It's about the entirety of what goes into the power force behind the policing. And because we are deemed fucking criminal, that's what it boils down to.
Hey, I appreciate that. I love the passion. Tonight, we have to have it. No respectability politics. None. We got to get rid of it, because we are dealing with a pandemic. We're dealing with some serious situations. And I thank you, Ashton, for sharing all of that information. It's so needed. A 5-star. What's going on, Mr. Monroe? How you doing, dear brother? Are you still in Minnesota?
I'm still here.
Man, I gotta salute you, brother. And I had to have you on because you two brothers put your life on the line for real. Not for the camera, not for TV, not for the internet. You put your lives on the line for real, dear brother. I've texted you and you've been in the hospital, and all you talk about is getting back out there fighting for our kids, fighting for our community, fighting for what's real, fighting for what's right. And I know that you're out there doing the right thing. And just as I said to Brother Ashton, we're seeing that the protesters are being turned into the criminals and the police are being turned into victims.
That's right.
I'd love for you to give us what's going on in Minnesota and give us your thoughts and your evaluation and commentary.
Y'all, I have to get off. Right quick. But hello,
okay.
Brother Jerry. I've been watching you. Goodbye, Ashton. Goodbye, Said. Y'all stay black, stay strong.
Thank you, love.
Fight.
Thank
Much
you.
love to y'all.
Peace and blessings. Yes, sir. Go ahead, brother Moreau.
It's a lot of orchestrated confusion. You got a lot of people in charge that don't know what they're doing. These people have been dealing with this pandemic for a while. They don't have grocery stores. They don't have convenience stores. If you don't hit a convenience store by 6 o'clock, you're done. While I've been here, I've actually had 2 days where I didn't eat anything.
What?
Because I couldn't find anything. So when you see these people breaking into these stores, a lot of them breaking into them stores just to get a meal. But they won't say that. The biggest misconception here is that black people are the ones doing all the looting and robbing. That's a lie. I was inside of a Kmart 2 nights ago, filming while they looting. 90% white boys. 90%.
90%.
Don't look so surprised.
90%, huh?
90%. No questions.
Hey.
But you know what?
Yeah.
I ain't mad at them. If you don't want them looting and robbing, stop fucking killing them.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. Now, I say people in charge don't know what they're doing because you got 4 perpetrators that committed murder. You have probable cause. I don't give a damn if you got to pick them up on jaywalking. You can upgrade the charges later. And I think that the mayors and all of the cities that them popped off, they some bitches. Because they should be on the phone with this mayor telling them, look, you need to clean your shit up because it's affecting my city.
Right.
And all it takes, I'm telling you, I talk to them every day. They just want the other 3 arrested and charged. They want first-degree murder charges. They don't have a death penalty. So they want these 4 people in jail for as long as they can be there. But it's a lot of people here making decisions that don't know what they do.
Wow. That's heavy, man. That's heavy. I wanted to ask you this, dear brother. We're hearing that the National Guard is out there, and I heard from a couple reports that they're using maximum force on melanated people. What's the groundswell? I mean, are we being attacked, or is that a mischaracterization of what's happening?
They attacking small groups of people. Look, man, I was in the Kmart the other night for an hour. They done set the place on fire. They stealing everything in there. They set the staffing agency on fire outside. They set an excavator that dig up concrete on fire. 3 hours. What fucking National Guard was? Man, they don't want it with them youngsters, man. They don't want it. And them youngsters ain't finna back down. They done already said, if you don't pick them up, we're gonna burn this bitch to the ground. And if you charge them, run them through the system, and let them go, we're gonna burn this bitch to the ground. And they mean that. Now I'm gonna tell you what I know for a fact, and Ashton is gonna hit home. They ain't mashing on them like they could. Because it's white boys. They ain't mashing on them like they should.
Wow.
Because it's white boys.
Wow.
They ain't doing it. I'm here. I'm in the middle of it.
Wow.
Cedric.
They not gonna mash on them because they white boys.
Cedric, you okay?
I'm done because I'm thinking about Minneapolis, Minnesota's like 6% black.
Like,
dude, I'm there.
Connect the dots.
If it was all black people doing this, they'd have dropped a bomb on us 3 days ago.
Man.
Think about it.
But they will not do it because there's too many white people involved.
Wow, man. Come on, man. God.
Cedric, don't be shocked, bro. This is always been the reality, bro. Like here's the thing. My first experience in Houston, going to get a cab when that was a thing. I'm running up Gessner from Richmond Avenue so I can go to Walmart at the time, and I'm under this pressure. I can't find my mom, my brother, and sister. They're still in New Orleans. Half my city is underwater. I'm calling people. I'm trying to do this, that, and the other. I'm trying to locate family members, searching through the Astrodome, looking at pictures. And the first thing, because that call I got right before I was going to get in that cab was my mother, who I had not heard from since New Orleans went underwater. And that officer had the partner I was with at the time not been behind me, said, "Why are you accosting him? Why you are arresting him?" I was like, "Sir, I'm not even from here. I'm from New Orleans. I don't know what you're talking about." And my partner was like, "Nah, you're not taking him. Give us a description of who you're looking for." Dispatcher. 5'6", light-skinned Latino, white t-shirt, black jeans. I'm 6 feet tall, and I've always been over 200 pounds. Hello, I have a bald head. Dude had full head of hair and a cap on, and you said I fit the fucking description. That will always be my impression of Houston Police Department. A bunch of pigs who are infiltrated by white supremacist organizations walking around during these protests in these streets right here in Houston, flashing white power signs. You got me fucked up.
Hold on, wait. You're saying Houston Police flash white power signals.
Understand that me, Jerry, and every other activist have people who see everything that everybody does. We monitor the racists just like they monitor us. We are educated people. We're not stupid. If we know how to watch our six, that means we're watching you. You know how mama say keep your head on a swivel?
Right.
Well, I grew up black, so I automatically knew how to do that. So when you think about when people send you nasty emails and death threats and all this other stuff, okay, come at me, bro. But here's the thing. When you put that in context, everything that I talked about earlier, and you put that in context, they don't vet people. They just hire people because it's the patriotic thing to do. And Mayor Turner run behind him because he went to UH off, probably some white people gave him favor, and he was reared. What human being is reared? Animals are reared. You understand what I'm telling you? Right. So it's not an attack, but I think these politicians think it's still the 1980s when people forgot that there was a civil rights movement and didn't train their children how to be around white people in the context of when I was working at a hotel in New Orleans and I was in management. And this black person was like, "Ashton, you shouldn't talk like that in front of these white people." And I'd be like, "Why not? They talk like that. So why should I have to suppress who the hell I am in order to make a living? Because you see me as too much for your whiteness. And why should I have to do it because you're comfortable being a docile Negro? Because I don't have time for the coon shit. I don't have time for people telling me, you should say this, you should say this, you should say it like that." No, I do not care. My community is at stake. That's all I care about. My community is hungry, not just for change, but they're hungry in their stomach. Yeah. My community is hungry for health care because we're sick. My community, our community. We go through this shit because we allow people to give us free turkeys and Thanksgiving, but they don't show up. And then when they show up, they do these press conferences and nothing follows. And then here's the thing. When I'm not on the street, and when a lot of us aren't on the street, we are sitting across from people and working on things. Even Secunda, when she was running around. Listen, I've worked on multiple bills in the Texas legislature that have literally become law in the room, directing what phrase that's going in it, right? And when, I always talk about this because it sticks with me. When I was sitting next to Miss Geneva Reedville, Sandra Bland's mother, during the hearings in the Homeland Security Committee before it got passed by the Texas legislature, we only had 5 or 6 of us, if that, and a bunch of police behind us trying to kill the bill, right? And when you think about the fact that people was like, Ashton, why you telling me? We sent emails, bro. We sent text messages. Everybody went through their contact list at the time and was like, hey, we doing this here. Da, 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 da. Yeah, I'm gonna come. Oh, bro, I'm gonna stay home. Well, you stay home. Your home almost cost you your own fucking rights. So don't.
Well, you know what, man.
Don't lecture us about what we doing, right? Because when we're talking about policy shifts, meaning we're going to, if I have to vote for you, I have the right to hold you accountable. So that means I'm gonna come to you wherever you are and make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, because the people are depending on you, right? Because when you think about the census, it determines how much neighborhoods get in terms of spending, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of even healthcare and education. Absolutely. But people have to know who to be mad at. So if HPD shoots somebody and don't release the video, I'm showing up to the city council member, Mayor, why are you doing this? Hey, Mayor, why did you let Joe Grimaldi get on TV last year and accuse Black Lives Matter and other activists in the city of Houston have a no-knock warrant that is still yielding cases that are being reviewed? There's a photo circulating around that Gerald Goins actually accosted Gerald Floyd, and that his case is under review.
Wow. Hey, Gary, jump in on this. Jump in on getting on this, Gary, because I know you had some things you want to share. I think we just lost him, but if that is true, man, that's horrendous.
The attorney confirmed it. Well, it's true.
Go ahead, Brother Gary. Let's get to Brother Gary, because we want to make sure his signal is good enough for him to hang on and stay strong. All right.
I'm in.
Okay, go ahead. You were going to say something.
You got the wrong Cash App up there.
Okay,
but
that's what you sent me. But
it's GERRY.
Okay.
2 R's.
Okay, all right. Well, shit, that's what you sent me. Go ahead, brother.
Let's play detective for a second. I want Ashton to tell me, based on what the news is reporting, what happened to Floyd. What they say happened?
The cause of death?
No, what happened the day of the incident? What they said happened?
Well, the story's been changing. Basically, they're saying because there's been video coming out from behind them that shows that they were beating Floyd in the car, George in the car, before he was on the ground with the knee to his neck.
So they say George went in the store, passed the $20 bill. And let me shock the world. George never went in the store.
So who called the police?
George never went in the store. Why haven't you seen any video surveillance from him inside of the store?
Because they don't want you to. And they don't have
He never went in.
He never went in the store. That's what you said.
His partner went in the store. His partner passed the 20. He never went in the store.
So what are you saying?
I want both of y'all to know that when I flew in, I got off the plane, go and get my bags, and I got 2 federal agents waiting on me at baggage check.
Welcome to my world.
They knew I was in town. Supposedly, I had threatened to shoot some cops, which was a lie. Well, you did it on Facebook. I said if I'd have did it on Facebook, they'd have shut me down. So
the rest of here.
George never went in the store.
He never went in the store.
Never went in the store.
So look, when I went to Charlotte, y'all remember the Charlotte uprising a couple years back, right?
Absolutely.
I drove to Charlotte. I don't know if you remember that. And when I was there, this is a warning. So in Houston and everywhere you go, they have the ability with this software and hardware called Stingray to pull up data from cell phones because they mimic cell phone towers. And so there were churches that were safe houses, and the safe houses has to constantly move. I had to move 3 times when I was there that whole time, because when I would drive, they would try to access my phone and they would literally make the gyroscope skip in my GPS. And so when I turned my GPS off, the car that was following me stopped me because I pulled off to the side like I wasn't going anywhere. And by the time I got to the church where I was scheduled to stay at, that church had been raided. You know what they raided them for? Milk. Because milk suppresses tear gas, right? So these are things that people have to know. Like everywhere I've gone, when we shut down freeways in St. Louis, when we've marched in Philadelphia, when I've been a part of stuff around the country, each time I've experienced tear gas in some way, shape, or form, and had to have milk on me. And think about the fact that today they're not showing this either, but people don't realize that street medics carry the milk and all these other things, and cops will confiscate them and will not care because they see that as a threat. And I don't know how. So what I'm saying is, it's like with Jerry talking about being met with 2 federal agents. Here's the thing: we're constantly being monitored. People don't understand.
Well, you know what?
When I go
we
somewhere,
had a good conversation when they call themselves jamming milk.
Say it again.
We had a good conversation when I ran into the 2 Fed agents.
Okay.
Because I told them I come here to exercise my constitutional right. I come here to help the people. And if y'all got a fucking problem with it today, y'all can handle this right here. Well, how long you gonna be here? I say, well, if y'all keep fucking with me, I might stay 6 months.
What they say?
They laughing like Ashton, because at that point, maybe we got the wrong intel. You know, so it didn't really bother me. But I got here the first night. I went to a protest at the DA's house. And I'm gonna tell you something. Them youngsters are very strategic. They stretch these clowns out. They had multiple protests all over the city.
Mm-hmm.
So the police had to make decisions. These some gangster youngsters, mate, with the National Guard in town. How do you burn up a police precinct?
That's because that's what we're trained to do. When I started going through my civil disobedience training, we learned, even when we had that protest, Cedric, you were there when they tried to block us in at 288 in Sophomore.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. They didn't know that we knew that their tactic is to try to separate the group into parts. That's why when people ask me if I know when a protest is going on, I say no. Because a protest isn't always scheduled. It just happens. It just starts.
Mm-hmm.
It manifests. And that's what real activism is. When we plan stuff through Black Lives Matter Houston, it's because I know that me and my fellow organizers have a responsibility for the safety of the people who are showing up. And you know, I probably someone might disagree with me for this, but people kept asking me why on Friday and why so early. Well, because I have the experience of being in different cities and in Houston and dealing with police when it comes to protesting and how they get abusive and abrasive and they start badgering us. So we did it early because, number one, we still have Black children around. And those Black children deserve to see the Black solidarity happening because their Black life matters. Don't forget about Amir Rice or the little babies that got murdered in any town, USA, because of a no-knock raid, right? When you think about those kinds of things, those kids also are experiencing this trauma. They go to the schools with the racist teachers from Katy, sitting up in their classrooms at HISD. You got to put this stuff together. So when we're talking about those levels of oppression at a protest, that stuff culminates. People are angry, right? You don't get to tell somebody how to be angry. You don't get to say, well, hold off, right? Because at the end of the day, are you losing sleep? Because I don't see, if you're not active in the community in any way, shape, or form, why you should have an opinion. Because you've declared that you don't care about what's happening by making that statement and taking the actions that you take, right? So when you think what Jerry say, you know, and from my other experiences, when you think about that, I knew that the protests were going to break off. That's why I ended it at 4:00 to give people the space to do that.
That's right.
But it was a community event to take back space from white people who like to define and determine what we're going through for us and treating our lived experience as if we're anecdotal, coming from the ivory towers of education that a lot of us don't have access to, but we get to define who we are.
Well said. Gary, I want to ask you, because Ashton brought up a great point about, you know, the paternalism of white folk trying to take over and confiscate movements. We've seen Antifa become a domestic terrorist organization, a la Bill Barr and the Department of Justice. What are your thoughts in terms of on the ground level? And I've heard reports about the umbrella man, the weather man, and all these provocateurs taking over the movement and destroying property. What is your perspective? I know you mentioned many people are rioting because or rebelling because of the lack of resources. What can you give us an honest depiction from your perspective of this riot versus rebellion, protest versus terrorism? Can you expound on this? Because we see a lot of people denigrating the looting, denigrating the protesters, but not talking about the murderers and the cops' horrendous and deplorable behavior.
We've been infiltrated. It's not hard to figure out. You know, at a Burger King the other night, who the fuck leave 20 bricks on the drive-through window?
What?
Now, hold on. I came here to support the community, but now I'm doing some other stuff. So I put my expertise together, and the cop that you saw on Facebook that was busting the windows out in the auto zone.
That plainclothes cop.
That's Officer Jason Peterson from the St. Paul Police Department. These people, without going into too much detail, asked for my help. The first thing I said, I ain't finna be dealing with that type of shit, because I already know what y'all doing. You infiltrating, you acting like you a protester or a sympathizer, and you really out here cranking this shit up so your people can get loose on my people. Now, I'm gonna give you the nugget of the year. They heard it on my show, so I'm gonna give it to y'all. Well, man, we really need your help. Tell you what, got to give me a peace offering. I'm telling you on my dead mama grave what the conversation was. Got to give me a peace offering. What you want? I know you ain't gonna give me all 4 of them, but you got to put that white boy in them cuffs. 30 minutes later, they had a press conference.
Wow.
30 minutes later.
Wow.
Now, I'm saying this on the internet. I can't take this shit back. I'm going to either shit or get off the pot. I look like a fucking fool right now. 30 minutes later, that man was on the fucking news. Mr. Monroe, when you leave it? When you put the other 3 in them handcuffs? At the end of the day, this can stop tomorrow. It can. These people are not tired.
It's really just that easy.
It's that easy. But this the good old boy system here. You got a DA that's been in office for 30 years. 400 police fatal shootings. 1 conviction.
Wow.
Out of 400.
Wow.
This the norm. Now, I want to say this here because
Gary, hold on.
y'all was bringing up Art Acevedo.
Yeah.
I said it on my show. I'm going to say it on your show. Acevedo, you need to sit the hell down. Stop worrying about what the hell going on in Minnesota, because you got enough shit going on in Houston. You got enough cops killing us in Houston.
That's the truth.
Won't you do something with Gerald Goins' fucking ass? That's what you need to worry about.
Ashton,
don't worry about down here.
Ashton, I know you got to go, man. Go ahead and sign off, man. Sign off. Hold on, Gary. Let Ashton sign off because I don't want to hold him too long. He probably got 3 or 4 more interviews. He's got 5 or 6 more protests. You know what I'm saying? The brother's doing the best he can. So I wouldn't
exaggerating, bro.
Sign off, man.
So if I've never met you before, my name is Ashton Woods. I've been in Houston since 2005, and I've been in the activist community since 2008. I guess I want to leave you with this. Everything that you heard, I heard me say, I meant every last word. If you don't believe me, you can hit up the Google. It's not about, for me, it's not about being a leader. It's just about showing up. Because if you have to ask who's going to do this thing because you noticed it, you are responsible now because you noticed it. You have to call it out. So if you don't know how to do that, you can contact any one of us, any of the activists that you know of, and reach out and see where you fit in. You know, because it's not as simple as what can I do? It's not as simple as where can I show up? It's about making sure that you are looking at the shit that you are going through personally and how it directly affects you. And if it's tied or connected to any of the issues that are ongoing in this country and right here in Houston, because when you connect the dots and when you understand who is doing what and what the power structures are, you can actually learn how to dismantle said power structures without being an infiltrator into them, without having to assimilate into them. When you're dismantling white supremacy, you're actually dismantling laws that have been on the books for years. There's still laws that could be seen as racist on the city charter right here in Houston, right? And I want to leave you with this. HPD is in negotiations with the city of Houston again. We have a chance to make them make the negotiations public and force policy change, which means that will require them to be more transparent. And you got all of these other law enforcement agencies, which total over 150. But I want to talk about Kim Ogg, Sheriff Gonzalez, and the constables, because they all have their own data that they do not want out there. And they need to put it out there, because I know when we passed the Sanderman Act, within months of it being signed into law, we knew by the end of 2016 how many Black people had been stopped in Harris County for a broken tail light, which totaled 80% of the stop rate. Real time. Could you imagine what that would look like when we stand in front of the commissioner's court against the sheriff or Kim Ogg when they ask for money? And they say, well, we need this for this. Well, the data shows that y'all are not making these types of arrests. So you don't need this many sheriff's deputies. We ain't giving you the damn money. Just like when we stopped Kim Ogg for getting money for 100 more prosecutors. What you need prosecutors for? Why aren't your diversion programs in play? Right? Why won't R.A. Acevedo or Sylvester Turner make him comply with the new bail reform? Right? Because a lot of people don't know this, but they're supposed to just be issuing tickets right now. They're not supposed to be making arrests and taking people's PPE and throwing them in the gym off-site from Harris County Jail and letting them sit. Because I'm tired. I got
guess what?
I got information from a Black woman who got arrested and was sitting in jail, and she's on her menstruation cycle. They made that woman sit in her blood. You don't treat no Black people like that. So if you want to find me, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Ashton P. Woods, or you can look up BLMHOU. But I'm telling you, this is not over. How they're treating everyday citizens in Houston right now is bad.
Don't go nowhere real quick. You say we got to force change.
Yeah.
HPD been on my phone every day since I've been gone. Man, when you coming home? I'm here now. So when I do come home, I'm calling a meeting of the dons of the city. That means Ashton P. Woods gonna sit at the table with a whole bunch of people that you don't have a clue about that really run these neighborhoods. And if these laws don't line it up, we revoking their passes to even come in our neighborhood. So once we had a meeting with all of us, they gonna come to the table. They coming to our table. And when you come to our table, you gonna give us what we want, or your police will never set foot in our neighborhoods again.
Right, because they don't patrol white neighborhoods. They create crime zones in Houston. They don't tell y'all that. They've been doing this for years. That's how they got the Southline gang injunction. You stop a certain amount of people, it becomes a hotspot in their data that they don't share. So you create areas that are criminal that aren't even criminal, right? Think about that for a second. And that's exactly. So it's like they think that the end all be all is we show up in a black t-shirt and some jeans and we are protesting, but they don't know who we know or what we know and how we can cause change. Right? They don't know what we know. And that's the thing. So when we are seeing 40 dump trucks and people coming in SWAT gear from other areas to come into Houston and all this other stuff. And Greg Abbott exercising his governmental power to mobilize the National Guard and declare a state of emergency, which I don't people understand when your rights get suspended in these emergencies. Don't forget that we're in a pandemic. Don't forget that we're on restrictions. Those things are punishable by law. So in context, one way or the other, they finding a way to criminalize us.
Man, thank you, brother. And
I tell you this here, hopefully that a lady, man, got ran over by that horse.
Yeah.
If that would have happened to me, I'd have punched the shit out that horse.
You remember what happened to the last time they accused somebody that didn't punch a horse?
I'd have went to jail then, because I'd have punched the fuck out that horse.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, I much love to you, Ashton. We'll see you later. All right.
All right.
Come on, brother. Hey, brother Gary, you know what I'm saying? I want to ask you a few more questions, but we got this is a connection I want you to make because I want you to have this dear brother on your show. I want you to have this brother on your show. And for those that don't know, Gary Monroe has one of the most powerful shows on the internet right now. Talk about it, Gary, and let people know about your show, because you got to have Greg on the show, because he's got a book that's going to change not only 2020, and we all know 2020 has been a year, but it's going to change the next 4 to 5 years. So please, Gary, let this dear brother know about your show.
Well, it's called the War Zone.
War Zone.
And we created it. Basically, we created our own black media outlet so that we could get information out so the African-American community could really know what's going on. But it grew into something else. So now we've had entertainers, athletes. I mean, I love the regular joke. You know, the regular people come on. We talk about real issues. Like this weekend, I had to cancel 2 guests because of, you know, George's murder.
Right.
I canceled Mark Breland, who trained Deontay Wilder.
Oh, wow.
For the last fight against Fury that he lost, and Wilder fired him. And then I canceled Don King.
Don King.
So, you know, the show is like Ellen, it's like the Steve Harvey talk show. Is just virtual, but everybody comes on and we talk about real issues.
That's real. That's real. And this is a real issue. I want you to hear, Gary. Greg Palast is one of the most foremost investigative reporters. He's done some of the most important investigative reporting in the history of investigative reporting. That's not hyperbole. That's facts. He told us what Trump was going to do in 2016, and it happened. He shared this information with Eric Holder. They told Obama. They said they're going to steal the election. And Obama said, no, I don't want to say anything because they're going to think I'm racist. Greg pointed that out, and he told them. He let them know that they were going to steal the election, just like they're trying to steal the election for 2020. We need black people. We need brown people. We need yellow, whatever you are. We need people to hear this information so that they can begin to protect themselves and make the right decisions. So we won't have this ridiculous nonsense that we call a president in the White House for 2020. Greg, go ahead and introduce yourself so people can hear you and they can know a little bit more about what I'm talking about.
All right. My name is Greg Palast, and I'm an investigative reporter. Take a look. We don't have many left in the USA. I work basically for British outlets, the Guardian newspaper, and I was known for my reports for BBC television and the Guardian and Rolling Stone. I do like to give as many reports as I can for Democracy Now!, KPFT Houston, and Houston outlets. Because there's a lot going on there. And I've just finished a book that's going to come out in July called How Trump Stole 2020. The case, it is the hunt for America's vanished voters. Here's the deal, is that in America, 16.7 million people were removed from the voter rolls in the last 2 years, purged. Now, for those who don't know me, I'm the
wait. You said almost 20 million people were taken from the rolls.
17 million people. They're taken off the voter rolls. You think you're going to vote. You're going to show up to vote. You're in the swing state of Texas. In fact, it shouldn't be a swing state. It should be a blue state if you let everyone vote. But you have mass purges going on the voter rolls. You won't even know it. In other words, what they're doing is they're removing people by the hundreds of thousands on all kinds of cockamamie reasons. And I have busted them again and again and again. And like you say, I did go get the information to Obama, Eric Holder, Congressman Alcee Hastings, the dean of the Congressional Black Caucus. Personally, he took my investigation of the attack on the black voter in America, which I did for Rolling Stone magazine. And he took that Rolling Stone article and he literally walked across the bridge at the Potomac from Congress to the Justice Department to put it in Loretta Lynch's hand. She was the Attorney General under Obama, and said, I don't want to mail this to you because I don't want you to say you never got it. I'm putting Greg Palast's story in your hand so that you will know what he said, and you can say, and you can't say you didn't know it. And Eric Holder said he was also very shaken up by this stuff, but I'm not quite sure they did anything before the 2016 election to put black voters back on the voter rolls, and you saw the effects. So when you get this book, go to gregpalast.com. You'll get some of my reports I've already done. You can get How Trump Stole 2020. Well, you can order it now for July 14. It also, by the way, I'm proud to say that it's not one of these PBS good for you books. It's real investigative reporting, but there's a lot of it's weirdly enjoyable. And what I did was I put a 48-page comic book in the middle by the brilliant Ted Rall. And I want you to know something about Ted Rall. There's a reason why I put him in there. It has to do with what's going on this week. As we speak, Los Angeles is under martial law. We've got National Guard in the street. We have cops running amok. We have a police riot going on. I have film of it. Go to gregpalast.com. You'll see the film of the police riot. White cops threatening protesters of color, young kids. Ted Rall was a cartoonist and a columnist for the LA Times. And what he had the guts to do was attack the LAPD and make fun of them in his cartoons, lampoon them for their vicious brutality against young Hispanic and black citizens of Los Angeles, because he went in and exposed and made fun of the LAPD. The LAPD demanded that the Times fire him, and they did. So he lost his job at the LA Times because he dared speak out about our out of control, basically slave patrol that we call the LAPD. Yeah. That's what's going on here. And by the way, so last night, just so you know, I want you to know this story, and you can see it on my site. You can actually see the film. Okay, I'm out on the street. There's an 8 p.m. curfew because we now have martial law in the great United States of America. So we have martial law in the United States of America, in Los Angeles. Yes, in Los Angeles, right? Like Hollywood is going to rise up in an insurrection. It's ridiculous. So anyway, so we had kids protesting, and there were only about five protesters made it to where I was, in front of, right near the police headquarters. There were hundreds of cops. There were 40 squad cars, all lights screaming, braying, the show of force nonsense they try to do. And then a cop, it's dark, remember? So he raises what looks like a shotgun or something. He's raising a weapon to his eyes, and he starts shouting, 40 up, curfew. I'm going to put a 40 into you. Now understand, he either meant that there were two choices there. Okay, first, 40 millimeter tear gas shell, which is probably what he was talking about. Well, he was aiming it right at point blank range at these kids. Okay, now I remember when another reporter, Ruben Salazar, was murdered by the LA police because they shot a tear gas canister into his head. Okay, so I've seen this story before. They killed with those tear gas canisters. Not about tears, it's about death. Okay, so they killed Ruben Salazar. By the way, the guy that broke that story was so shaken up. His name was Hunter S. Thompson, that he had to spend the weekend in Las Vegas to recover. The weekend became more famous than the Salazar story. But so this cop, whether he was talking about a 40 caliber bullet, which is standard issue to LAPD, I was living in England. They don't carry guns to kill their own citizens. Okay, So that's what we're doing here. Now, why am I bringing this up in the middle of our discussion of stealing the black vote? Because if you don't count the votes and you have a president who's not elected by the people, and you have governors and mayors who are not elected by the people, and by the way, we have a hell of a lot of vote suppression in Los Angeles, just so you know. If you're unelected, you don't give a damn what you do to the people. You can't kill your own citizens if you need their vote, right? But if you don't need their vote, you can steal their lives because you've stolen their votes. That's the game. And what they're doing here, let me give you some examples, okay? I was just in the swing state of Georgia. Now, some of you may know that Stacey Abrams was the first black woman in the United States of America to ever run for governor. I don't mean just in Georgia. I mean, like, we've never even had a black woman try to run in New York. So first black woman to run for governor. She's running against a goober named Brian Kemp. Now, Brian Kemp is also Secretary of State. That means he's the guy in charge of the voter rolls, right? Right. So he removes, are you ready for this? Nearly 500,000 voters from the voter rolls. Nearly 500,000. Who are they? Okay, I go to the polling stations in Georgia, and I see voter after voter being thrown out on their keister. They're black, and they're Hispanic, and they're Muslim, and they're Asian. Every one of the people being thrown out of the voting stations, including, by the way, if you go to my site, you'll see this, and you'll see this in the book too. Christine Jordan, 92-year-old cousin of Martin Luther King, voting at the same polling station for 50 years since 1968, which is the year her cousin was murdered. King was murdered. Right. And they wouldn't let her vote. They said that she lost her vote because they said she hadn't been voting. She's never missed an election. Her cousin died so she could vote. She wasn't going to miss an election. So they threw her out. We investigated, and you'll see in How Trump Stole 2020. We found that 340,134 people were wrongly removed from the voter rolls. That's 1/3 people. We took every single name, and you know what I did? I went to Silicon Valley. I got the experts, work with eBay and Amazon and Google and all those. And I said, can you tell me if these people were wrongly removed from the voter rolls? And they went through name by name by name. Literally every name, and said, well, 1/3 people should never have been removed from the voter rolls. Their crime was voting while black, okay? And that's what's happening in Texas. That's what's happening in Georgia. By the way, Georgia should be a Democratic state. It's a white minority state today. Do you know that? It's a white minority state. How come the GOP is in charge? The answer is because they stole the vote, okay? That's why. Trump, okay, forget Georgia, Wisconsin. Supposedly Trump won that by 23,000 votes. Get ready for this. Trump and the GOP are demanding that they remove 250,000 voters from the voter rolls of Wisconsin. That's the ultimate swing state. Right. Trump only won by 23,000 votes, and they're going to take out 10 times as many as his margin. Who are they taking away? They're taking away people. They say, oh, they've left Wisconsin or they left their county. Well, they said have moved away and shouldn't be allowed to vote. Sequana Taylor, I have her. You'll see, she's in the How Trump Stole 2020. Sequana Taylor is a black woman, so I'm not surprised that she was purged from the voter rolls of Wisconsin. However, Sequana Taylor, she was purged because she moved out of Milwaukee. Okay, I don't think she moved out of Milwaukee. She's the Milwaukee County Supervisor. Okay, but she is a black woman, so she shouldn't be allowed to vote, right? This is America today. If I sound upset, remember a guy was pointing a gun at me just a few hours ago. I didn't really like it. It was a cop, which meant that if he shot me, he'd say I was threatening him with my hat or whatever. Just so you know, the reason I'm not sitting under a blanket, with a blanket over my head in a morgue, is that I had my where is it? My press badge with me.
So he literally had a gun on him.
And I'm holding up the press badge in front of my face. I'm running at the cop so he doesn't shoot someone else. And I'm screaming,
Greg, you were getting ready to get shot.
So I'm screaming, press. Thank God. I was approaching him, but I'm wearing a suit. I always do because I know these situations are dangerous. So I wear a suit so I don't look like your typical protester or something. Right. And I have my hat and I've got my press badge. I'm yelling, press. And suddenly this guy was going to shoot me. And he's saying, I'm going to put a 40 in you. Do you know what it is to be hit with a 40mm tear gas shell? It goes in one side and out the other. Okay. And it burns what's in between. It's not pleasant. You know, this is not, you know, so I wanted to stop the guy. As soon as he saw the press badge, suddenly he becomes a pussycat because he's nervous. I'm pressed and I've got a camera, right?
Let me ask you this, and I appreciate you for doing your reporting and putting your life on the line and doing all of these things that you've been doing for decades upon decades and giving us the information that we need. And I'm sorry that this has to happen to you, but I'm even more happy and excited and grateful that you're doing the work that you're doing, because this is so imperative. It's so important. One of the things that I was reading in the book that really just blew my mind is that so much talked about voter fraud. And according to, you know, your book, Whose Absentees Votes Are Counted, there's a Rutgers professor, and you know better than I, you probably know her personally. She's the nation's top fraud expert. She found just 6 verified cases. I repeat, 6 verified cases of voter impersonation. And all of those
over a decade. You have to understand. Right. That means, okay, so Trump keeps talking about voter fraud. Thank you, Ed, for bringing this up. Okay, Trump talks about voter fraud, mail-in ballots. Okay, so Lorraine Minetti, she's a professor from Rutgers. She's the #1 expert on vote fraud. And she said, look, there's been 6 cases in over 10 years. It's just 6 cases of people who've been caught impersonating other voters, which is what you would do. You would take their mail-in ballot, sign their name, and mail it in. Right. And Trump says, oh, it's easy. No, it's not easy to do. You get caught real easy. So in other words, and I actually calculated it, the chance you will get hit by lightning is 500% higher than the chance you will commit vote fraud.
Wow.
You don't get hit by, you know, that's how rare it is. But what's not rare, not in Texas, not in Georgia, not in California, not in Wisconsin or Minnesota or Virginia. What's not rare is removing black people from the voter rolls for no damn reason other than voting while black. They have all kinds of cockamamie reasons, and I describe them in the book. They play other games. Of course, they go after the black vote. They go after because there's no defenders. Like there's a chapter in my book called "The Silence of the Democratic Lambs." I'm sorry, where's Nancy Pelosi? Where's all these people on the loss of the black vote? How do you think they lost 2016? I just told you that they stole Wisconsin. Okay. And by the way, when they stole Michigan, you know what happened in Michigan? This is Detroit. This is Motown. Okay. And it's the United Auto Workers. How does a Democrat lose Michigan? The answer is the Democrat, Hillary Clinton, didn't lose Michigan. Okay. Are you ready? 75,355 ballots were never counted. Donald Trump supposedly won Michigan by 10,000 votes.
Right.
But 7 times as many votes were cast and never counted in the city of Detroit. What happened was 87 vote machines broke down and didn't register those 75,000 votes. And they said, well, we can't say that they went to Hillary Clinton. Well, yeah, because who knows? I mean, obviously Detroit is Trump town. So they claim that they don't know whose votes those were that were lost in those machines. Now understand, the African-American woman who's city clerk of Detroit told the state before the election, our voting machines are old, they're going to break down, they don't work. And the state said, go fly, because it wasn't their votes that were going to get lost when those machines broke down. They knew it in advance. And that's how they stole. That's how they stole Michigan. They stole Wisconsin. They stole Pennsylvania. They stole Iowa. They stole Ohio, and the list goes on. Once again, if you count, basically there were 7.8 million votes that were stolen. When I say stolen, that means several million votes were cast and never counted. They call it spoilage in the vote business. And by the way, the chance your vote will spoil is 900% higher if you're black than if you're white. 900% higher if you lose your vote on a technical ground if you're black than if you're white. And then there are several million people who are simply blocked from voting, including, you take Wisconsin coming up, which is going to be the ultimate swing state, Wisconsin, and Texas. Swing state, right?
Right.
So because of the demographics, but you have to have an ID in Texas and in Wisconsin. You can't use your student ID. You can't use the University of Texas student photo ID.
Right.
It doesn't qualify for voting. Now, your concealed carry weapons license you can use for voting, but not your student ID. And the same is in Wisconsin. 182 University of Wisconsin students do not have the proper ID to vote, the university, which is controlled by the GOP hacks, will not give out the correct IDs so students will vote. In addition, according to the University of Wisconsin study, 50,000 Black people, when they passed the new voter ID in 2 weeks before the election in 2016, 50,000 Black people lost their votes because they didn't have the right ID.
Wait a second. So voter ID is destroying 50,000 opportunities for Black people to vote
In Wisconsin.
in elections.
In Wisconsin.
In just one state. In just Wisconsin. Now, the reason why I stopped you right there, and I want you to definitely break it down, is that's not just the presidential elections, is it? Or is that the local and the state elections as well?
Yes, it's everything. And the thing is, here's the evil, okay? They know if they let everyone vote, they don't stand a chance. But I want to tell people one good thing, though. This is very, very, very important to know. Okay, so they played this game. They played games with ID, stopping students and Black people from voting in Wisconsin in 2016. And that's what gave the state and the presidency to Donald Trump. However, in 2018, the public got pissed off. And they threw out the governor, Scott Walker. Right now, you have a Democrat, Tony Evers, and a wonderful, brilliant, militant young Black man named Mandela Barnes, who's the lieutenant governor. I just filmed him in Wisconsin just before the lockdown. And so they can steal millions of votes, but we can still overcome the steal. They can't steal all the votes all the time. And that's what Mandela Barnes and Tony Evers proved in Wisconsin. That was the point. They proved that they can steal a lot of votes, but they can't steal every vote every time. So we got to overcome the steal.
The steal. How do we overcome the steal? We're going to have further conversations, but I want to get your ideas, because from what I read in the book, if your name was James Brown and you were in Detroit or in Atlanta, they threw your name away. If your name was Hector Rodriguez in one state, in another state, they said that was the same person, so they threw away the votes. How can we, break that down, and then how can we counteract?
Let me break some of that down. Okay, there's a white supremacist named Chris Kobach. He's running for Senate in Kansas. He was the Secretary of State of Kansas. He's what I call Trump's vote thief in chief. He's the guy who came up with the plan, which ultimately was key to Trump's so-called election. He came up with something called interstate crosscheck. He passed out a list of 7 million names of voters, which he gave out to 30 Republican-controlled states, and said these are potential double voters. Okay, like you say, James Brown. Right. Georgia alone had 365 guys named James Brown. Almost all of them lost their right to vote because they say, it's the same voter. Believe it or not, James Brown. Now, James Thomas Brown, James Edward Brown is supposed to be the same voter. Hector Rodriguez, you brought up another one. If your last name is Rodriguez, Garcia, all these people went in to vote and they didn't know why they lost their votes. Just like Christine Jordan, King's cousin, she didn't know why she lost her right to vote, but I know. So this cross-check program created by Trump's crony, we exposed that, and some of it was blown apart, but he still won that election by because those people were purged from the rules. They didn't know it. So here's the first thing you can do to protect yourself. If we can't change the laws, there's 2 things you can do. Number 1, check your registration. And I don't care. Said if you've been voting at the same place for 20 years, check it. They're purging. This 92-year-old woman, King's cousin, was removed after 50 years voting the same place. If she'd have just checked your registration beforehand. Now you think, well, why should I check my registration? I've been voting 50 years. The answer is because if you happen to be of the non-white persuasion, they're trying to remove you from the voter rolls. And just about every state, except Oklahoma, you can register online. So in other words, if you see, oh wait, it says no such voter, you type in Cedric, and it doesn't give your name. Says, by the way, that happened to me in California. Last year, I checked my registration. It said no such voter. I had to re-register.
Wow.
So it happens all the time. If they don't want you, they figure out ways to get rid of you. So here's the thing. Check your registration online at the Secretary of State's office in Texas or your county commissioner. The second thing, if you're not registered, re-registered. If they have an old address, for God's sake, change your address. And make sure in Texas and other states like that you have ID. Now, one of the other problems that you had in Texas, that to get to mail in your ballot, you had to have a witness, but it's going back and forth in the courts now, whether you're going to have a witness if you mail in your ballot. You may need to mail in your ballot so you don't die, but make sure if it requires a witness statement or witness signature that you get a witness signature and that witness is a registered voter, that they check their registration. It's a big pain in the ass. And they want to make it that way. They want to make it as hard for voters of color to vote as you can. And then, of course, vote. Vote. If you're going to vote by mail, man, that's dangerous. Check and make sure you have the right postage. All your signatures are correct. The addresses are correct. Use their envelope, not yours. If you need a witness, sign the witness. And it says driver's license, by the way, in Texas on the mail-in ballot, and you don't have a driver's license, don't leave it blank. Put in no driver's license or they'll throw away your vote. Like that.
Say that one more again. Say it one more time, please.
If you mail in your ballot, especially in Texas, and it says on the outside of the mail-in ballot, put in your driver's license. Okay. If you don't have a driver's license, put no driver's license, or put in the last 4 numbers of your social security. These are tricks. If you don't know these tricks, they will trick you out of your vote. Okay. So be very careful if you do a mail-in vote. Also, if you want to mail in your vote and you're not getting a card, it looks like junk mail that says, do you want to mail in your vote? And you don't get that card, you better go to your county, in Houston, you go to your county offices and ask for a mail-in ballot. But if you do, make sure that you use their envelope, and repeat, don't use your own envelope, it gets thrown out. Make sure you have the right postage. It's usually 2 stamps, not 1. Sign it everywhere it needs to be. Get the witness you need if they're going to need a witness in Texas. And very, very carefully make sure that if it says fill in the bubbles. My parents lost their vote in San Diego because in their ballot, they didn't properly fill in the bubbles next to the candidate's name. If you put a check mark or an X, you'll lose your vote. Wow. Now, here's the thing. I'm telling you again, it's not random. Rich white people are not losing their vote because they don't challenge their votes. They're not removing people, right, who live, Silver Springs, Georgia, places like that, And here, I'm in the Hollywood Hills, right? I'm not worried about losing my vote, all right? But in most of this nation, especially voters of color, they're out to make sure that your vote doesn't count. And especially if you've moved down the street, they're going to take your vote away. So be careful. Re-register. I know the law says you don't have to if you moved within your building or down the street or in your neighborhood. You better re-register. You better.
There's a question I have to ask you, Greg, is because we're in a pandemic right now.
Yeah.
Right? And there's no way we're going to have a vaccine by November 3rd or
none that we can rely on because you have to need a year to test vaccines.
Right. So voting by mail might be the way. And if it's not, then we're putting ourselves in harm's way by going to go vote. And you're telling me that if we do vote by mail, there's a high probability that those votes will be thrown out.
Well, in my book, How Trump Stole 2020, I have a section called Mail-in Mania, because I think that people have gone a little bit crazy for mail-in voting. Here's the thing to remember. Ready for the ugliest statistic? 22% of all mail-in ballots never get counted. That's according to MIT. That's not according to Greg Palast. According to MIT study, 22%, that's 1 in 5 ballots that are mailed in never get counted. And one of the biggest problems, the reason why it's especially young people and Black people and voters with English as a second language don't get their ballots counted is that they don't get them in the first place. You can't mail in your ballot if they don't mail it to you. And so what happens is you're a student, you're a young person, you're a renter, you move in the building, you move down the street, you get a different apartment, you've been evicted, you've lost your job, you moved somewhere else, you moved in with your cousin. Make sure that you re-register, even if it's your cousin's house, and make sure your name's on their bill, etc. Otherwise, you'll never get your ballot to voting, and then you'll miss out. Don't miss out. This is a really important election, and I'm not even telling you to vote for. You want to vote for Trump? Vote for Trump. When I call my book "How Trump Stole 2020," I'm not saying he shouldn't be president. I'm just saying that who's ever president should be picked by the voters. How about that, Sid? Let's try that. That'll be something new for America. Let's let the voters decide. We don't. And by the way, some people may remember, some people forget or don't know. if you don't know my work or Greg Palast, I am the reporter who back in 2000 discovered that Katherine Harris and Jeb Bush had removed tens of thousands of black voters from the voter rolls, saying that they were felons who were not allowed to vote in Florida. They removed 58,000 black people.
58,000?
Yep, from the voter rolls. I have their names. I have all their names. I met them, like Willie Steen, a really great guy who was worked in a hospital as an orderly. By the way, you can't work in a hospital as an orderly if you have a felony record in Florida. And they said he had a felony record. They wouldn't let him vote. He'd never even gotten a traffic ticket. His only crime was voting while black. You know, of the 50,000 people, you know how many were illegal felon voters?
How many?
Zero. Okay? You know what? The New York Times took 4 years to cover my story of the fake felon purge of Florida. They did, and they said, you know what they said? They said the list was flawed. It wasn't flawed. It was fraud. There's a difference. Fraud, because there wasn't a single illegal voter. There's just a lot of black folk, and that's how George Bush became president of the United States, by just 537 votes in Florida in 2000. That made him president. All those votes stolen from black folk. That's why he was president. And then they did it again in 16. That's how.
I have to ask you this, because I know a lot of people out there listening thinking, man, how come we haven't heard about Greg Palast? How come we haven't heard about this? How come we haven't heard this information? You know, we got CNN on 24/7. We got MSNBC on 24/7. Why haven't they talked about this? Why hasn't this been discussed, Greg? Why am I just finding out about this right now?
Well, because I made the mistake of talking about the rights of black folk, which is not that doesn't sell a lot of cars on MSNBC. Okay, let's just be honest about it. They don't care. Okay, they rather talk about, you know, Trump's touching some woman's stuff and da da da. And the latest Trump, what did the Commander-in-Chief say today? It's cheap news. It's not investigated. They don't care. So I had to do the story about black voters losing their vote in Florida for BBC Television London and for the Guardian newspapers of London. This story that I was doing in Georgia. Okay, so where were they? I mean, by the way, I was on MSNBC. Joy Reid, who not coincidentally is a black host on MS. She'll put me on. So when I went into MSNBC, my first question to the producers was, what happened to the paleface hosts? Aren't they interested in what happened to these voters? And you also have, by the way, a real attack on Asian American voters. That's another new thing. But you know, there's no you can't sell soap with those stories.
So they're attacking African American votes. Can you go into, and I really want you to talk about this for a moment, is it seems like if you're not white and you're not of a certain perspective, then your vote could potentially be thrown out through all of the methods, whether it be interstate cross-check, whether it be provisional ballots, whether it be any other form of information. Your vote could be thrown out, and you wasted all that time standing in line, because normally those of color, people of color, have the longest lines and the longest wait time. It's been scientifically found. It's this study, promoting that, how difficult it is to vote while black. And to not only have that, but to have that vote thrown out. Can you talk about how that is something that's transpiring in real time?
I'll give you one really heartbreaking story. In 2008 and again in 2012, I went with the Freedom Faith Missionary Baptist Church of Dayton, Ohio, an African-American church group who went to do voting on the Sunday before the election, souls to the polls. And most black folk listening know what souls to the polls is. After church on the Sunday before the election, that's when you go, so that you because you can't take off Tuesday because you got 3 jobs, right? So you go Sunday. Well, the state of Ohio ruled that, to be fair, they're going to have, every county would have only one early voting station. Now think about that. There's a county in Ohio with only 6,000 people, and I think that includes the cows. All right. They get a polling station. Dayton, Ohio, where I was, had one polling station for 80,000 voters. 70% of black people voted on that day. I was with that church group while they waited 5 hours to vote. And then I went to Toledo. I went to Toledo, to the white suburbs, to see how long the lines were in Toledo's white suburbs. And what was it? Yeah, there was a line. There was a line of poll workers waiting for voters. They literally had zero lines. So 5 hours in the black township. That's what it is, a township. And zero wait for the white folk. And they even had cookies and coffee for the white folk. The black people remember, it's November in Dayton. It's freezing. They're told to stand in this long line that goes out through the garage. There's no coffee for them. Okay. And are you ready for this? That's not the worst part of it. The 5 hour wait. You know what? I didn't see anyone get out of line. The church group I went with, they just kept up their spirits, singing gospel and just keeping it together. And they say, we're going to vote. We don't care. We'll wait 10 hours. Jesse Jackson called me and he said, I've been waiting 7 hours in Cleveland. We got to the end of the line. They didn't give people ballots. So I got a hold of county supervisor. Said, what are you doing? You're not giving people real ballots. You're giving them applications for absentee ballots. Absentee ballots. They're not absent. They're right here in the polling station. How come they're getting absentee ballots? And he said, this just came down from the Republican Secretary of State. He said, there's one reason, because this way they can challenge those ballots. Because I told you 22% of mail-in ballots, and they were giving people in the station, they were giving them mail-in ballots, not real ballots, mail-in ballots. They had to fill in all that stuff. So they knew they could disqualify a lot of ballots. And Karl Rove, if you remember him, he is the kind of, that's that pudgy white guy with the soft little hands.
Senior advisors.
Yeah, they called him Bush's brain, though Bush called him Turd Blossom. I'm not kidding. And so Turd Blossom had this idea. That was his idea. If we get black people to vote on mail-in ballots and get white people to vote on regular ballots, we can disqualify the mail-in ballots. And then Romney wins Ohio and wins the presidency. It was a closer race than people realized in 12. They almost stole that one too. Okay, just so you know, it was real close. We busted that story. So you have to understand that. So even if you mail in your ballot, or the other thing is like you fill out a ballot in the polling station. In black precincts, they have crappier. And I just told you about Michigan. It was true in Florida. It's true in Michigan. They give you bad schools. They give you bad cops. They give you bad hospitals. They're going to give you bad voting machines. And when I say bad voting machines, not some guy in a cave changing your vote from Biden to Trump. Some guy with some fancy software. Forget all that. It's real simple. They put all the bad machines in minority areas that break down. I told you 87 machines broke down in Detroit in 2016, costing Hillary Michigan.
Damn.
Florida, you had over 100,000 votes thrown out, disqualified, including you had 800 votes thrown out in the blackest county in all of Florida, Gadsden County. It's almost entirely black, and they threw out 800 votes. And why? Because it said right in candidate's name. So a lot of people wrote in Al Gore. They voted for Al Gore and they wrote in Al Gore. You know what they did? They disqualified the Republicans disqualified 800 of those votes, saying, well, they checked Al Gore, but they also wrote in Al Gore. So that meant that they voted for two candidates. Oh, man. They voted for two candidates, both named Al Gore. Really?
It's terrible.
That's what but remember, believe me, if it were a white country club, they would have counted those votes. Simple.
Man, this is, thank you for your work, man. Thank you for your work. We need.
By the way, I'm sorry to be so grim. There's a lot of really bad jokes to keep you smiling.
No. What this show was about was giving people the reality. 2020 is about having a clear vision. Yeah. It's about understanding what we're facing against. And many people were sad and depressed, and they felt, that 2016 was a sign of black people not going to go vote, black people letting it down. No.
Can we put that, by the way, let's put that BS to rest. Okay, let me put this right now, and let me tell this to Hillary Clinton and the rest of these moaners who bitched about the black turnout in 16. Okay, lady, two things. Black people tried to vote, but they didn't get any help in voting. There were mass purge of black voters. And listen to this. I told you about 75,000 black votes in Detroit not counted.
Right.
The Green Party said, let's count those votes. We'll pay for it. People called that the recount. It wasn't a recount, said. It was actually a counting of those votes for the first time. Trump went to court to block it, saying this Green Party woman, Jill Stein, she doesn't have the right to ask for a recount because you can count the votes 90 times. She won't win. So the judge asked Hillary Clinton's lawyers who were in the courtroom, what does Hillary Clinton say? What does Secretary Clinton want? Does she want these votes counted or not? You know what their response was? Their response was, we're just here to observe. We're just here to observe. And she could have said, count those votes. Those are black people who waited hours in line to cast a vote. I want their ballots counted. And she won Michigan. But the Democrats will never challenge the Jim Crow count. They never have. There's one exception. Stacey Abrams in Georgia challenged the Jim Crow count. She cited my investigation of 340,000 people. She cited my story of Christine Jordan King's cousin losing her vote. Right. And she challenged vote. She said, I won, but I won't be inaugurated.
Before you go, I did want to bring this up for clarity. Many people don't know that the most, I guess you'd say, devious or malfeasance that we've seen in terms of voter restriction or purge has actually been done by the Democrats.
Yeah.
It's actually done in California, of all places.
Yeah. So California, we think,
talk about that.
It's hippies and incense and massage circles and stuff like that, at least pre-corona. And it's Democratic Party. So we think it's nice and progressive and everything is lovely and they really protect your vote. No, they don't, because it's an internal war within the Democratic Party. We have a one-party state, and you have the progressive Democrats, and we're in the majority, which is Hispanics, the black community, young people, students. That's the majority. And so the old guard, which are Democrats, the Jerry Brown guard and Alex Padilla, who's our Secretary of State, don't want an uprising of progressives in California. So they block the vote in California. And here's the horrible thing, said, is that whether it's the Democrats attacking the voters or the Republicans attacking the voters, they always attack the same voters. They attack young voters, progressive voters, black voters, Hispanic voters. Because remember, in this last primary, the Hispanic vote was entirely for what they called Uncle Bernie, Uncle Bernie. And so they went crazy. They weren't going to let Hispanics elect, put Bernie Sanders in the White House. That wasn't going to happen. So forget Theo Bernie. So they really blocked. And according to the number one, again, it's not me. I use the numbers from the top statisticians. I used to teach statistics, so I talked to statisticians. They went through the numbers. They said Bernie Sanders was shafted out of 553,000 votes, over 500,000 votes in California by the Democratic Party. So this is a type of games the Democrats play and the Republicans play. And unfortunately, it's the same group of voters, progressive, black, young, Asian American, Hispanic. That's who both parties are going after. And if you're wondering why the Democrats don't protect you, well, don't expect the Democrats to protect you. Protect your own damn vote. Check right after this program's over. I want everyone listening to make me this promise. I'm going to check. You check your registration. Check your registration. 17 million people have been purged. That means 1 in 12 voters. That means you check your registration.
Check your registration. Dear brother, please let everyone know about your website and how they can reach out to you and get more information so we can save ourselves from how Trump stole 2020.
Right. And how we can steal it back, by the way. It's not all grim. So go to gregpalace.com. It's on your screen. You can get all my reports, whether for Rolling Stone or Democracy Now!, KPFT, whatever. I put them all up on gregpalace.com. And you can, of course, until Patriot Act 4 kicks in, you can get the book, How Trump Stole 2020, The Hunt for America's Vanished Voters. How Trump Stole 2020 with the book by Ted Wall.
Hey, I caught that one. You got to come back and break that down and really give some more information. And I applaud you and I really appreciate you for doing this work. So many people have texted me and told me that I didn't even know. And I'm just happy that you exist to share this information and to keep.
I'm happy to exist too, but I'm happy even more that you exist out of Houston because, look, you're at ground zero on this fight, and so I really have a great admiration for the fact that you're just duking it out in what is one of the most difficult cities to organize politically and to get a fair shake in. So I'm glad you're there, and I hope to visit you in my next. Yeah,
definitely. Thank you, dear brother. We'll talk soon. Take care. That was the one and only Greg Palace, and we got our dear brother, Warren. What's going on, man? What's happening now? And hopefully we got Dr. Obadike Kamal tapping in too. I know you heard Greg Palace. I know you heard.
Yeah, I heard all of that.
And we've shared, and I know you're still holding down Trump. I already know. I know, and I know it's a lot of people out there saying this Negro is crazy. How in the world can he be for Donald J. Trump? But I know that you feel as if this is the right choice for you, and I think you also believe it's the right choice for African Americans. So I'm intrigued. And, what we do on the Conscious Mindset, you already know. You've been on the show 1,000 times, man. We give you news you can use, flavor you can save it. But you definitely need to tell a neighbor. And we're not afraid to go where other people are afraid to go. So I wanted to be able to give you an opportunity to expound and explicate why you believe that Trump is the one that we should choose for 2020, even though many would say that he led us into this pandemic. Some call it a pandemic. I call it a pandemic. But I will say this, that, we really need to understand and better deal with this. What's going on, Doc? I see you right now.
What's going on?
And I want the people out there to hear what you have to say, Brother Warren Houston, and also introduce, I know you're president-elect of the Houston Rotary Club, and I hope I said that correctly. Correct me if I said it wrong. But I definitely want to give you some respect and say you are a man of integrity and quality. That's the reason why we have you on the show. But I did want people to know, why are you voting for Trump in 2020 based on what he's done in 2019, 2018, 2017, 2016? What lets you believe that he's the one for your vote?
Well, Brother Sid, how you doing, Dr. Kamal Obadike?
Going on
as well. Now I don't know how much time we have.
Go ahead.
Because I like to lay the foundation. I like to properly lay the foundation.
Lay it.
Why I voted for Trump and why I'm looking to vote for him again.
You voted for 2016?
Yes, I did.
Oh wow.
Yes, I voted for Trump in 2016, and we'll vote for him in 2020. A lot of us, especially as it relates to the African American community, we operate through emotions. And so I just sit here and I just listen to Greg Palace go on. And I can't speak about what I don't know, but that's a lot of stealing based off of what he just said. That's a whole lot of stealing. I can't see how anybody get away with that much stealing. But that has always been the Democratic ticket into the African American community. It never had to do with anything to do with the politics. It didn't have anything to do with the facts of what was going on. It was always policies about racism or what the other party was doing to the Black community. They have nothing else to talk about, okay? But my main reason, even for being a Republican within itself, is that I don't know if all of us completely even know the history of the two parties within itself. And then for those that do know the history, they'll come back and say, well, there was a switch in the 1960s with Goldwater, and that's not true. I've done the research on the switch. The switch never happened. All the senators and mainly and representatives that were Democratic during the 60s and the civil rights issues, the majority of them stayed with that party until they either died or retired. So the switch did not happen. So I find it very hard for people who basically was with a party, which the Republican Party itself started with the abolishment of slavery. And to find them to have switched to a party, it's almost like Kennedy would say, the chicken's coming home to roost, will turn around and go back to the master's plantation. I have a problem with that, because if you're looking at an issue of being independent, if you're looking at an issue of being respected, then you don't look to the government to help you. You look to be accountable and responsible and to stand on your own 2 feet and be responsible for you, your surroundings, your community, and your situation in the area that you're in. Most of us don't even understand local politics. We're talking about the level of the president, but it's that what the president is doing is barely affecting you. Who are the leaders even in your community that are around you that you are electing? Those people on the level that you're looking at in your community are affecting you more than what Trump is doing in the White House. So it has always been the Republicans' party primary thing is to do for self, not to look for. When you're looking at the Democrats or the democracy, it's about handouts. It's about entitlement. If I have an entitlement mindset, I can never be respected or stand up as a man. So if you look at basically,
so you're saying Democrats have an entitlement handout mentality. You're saying Democrats they have an entitlement.
Yes.
They want the government to take care of them. They want the titty in their mouth, so to speak. That's what you're saying.
Right. That's exactly what I see. That's
okay.
Exactly what I see.
Dr. Kamal, slide on in the camera so we can see you, brother. And before you speak, I want to give you this introduction. We're talking to the one and only Dr. Kamal, poet, author, teacher, professor, man of many gifts and talents, and all of those wonderful things. And he's tapping in with us. And I know you probably heard what the brother said and might even have some issues with it or not. But I definitely love to get your take on what he said so far in his introduction.
Well, I tell you what, man, I'm not really here to argue who somebody's going to vote for. People should vote for what they feel. I disagree really with the argument that he's making. I understand that we started out with the Republican Party, but the Republican Party is not the same party that we started out with.
Get your sound right, Doc. Get your sound right. Get your sound right quick. I hear what he's saying. We're gonna bring it back just a second. Sound, brother. There's something wrong with your sound. But Warren, I did want to ask you this. What do you say to those that say you're brainwashed, you're fooling, and you're trying to be something that you're not, and you're not embracing principles and principalities that best support your people? What do you say to those that are saying, hey man, you're going to the sunken place, Warren? What do you say to those that say that?
You have to consider the source. In other words, you have to consider where is that information, where is those words coming from. I watched Beyonce's father, Mr. Knowles, being interviewed, and they questioned him about, I think it was Charlamagne the God. It might have been the Breakfast Club. And he was questioned about his feel about people considering him an Uncle Tom. And Mr. Knowles put it this way: when those people that are paying my bills when those people that are saying those things are paying my bills, then I worry about them calling me an Uncle Tom. So you have to consider the source of the people that are saying that, because normally when you have people that are protesting so loud against, I've never understood why, even though, and I saw this, I've dealt with this, even though I'm not a Democrat, I don't have any personal hate against anybody who's a Democrat. But people that have found out that I'm a Republican, they have turned around and personally hated me. So, I mean, it's like, what's the problem?
Personally hated you?
Personal attacks. This is not a personal thing. I'm going to talk to them. I'm talking in politics, and I'm going to lay out the facts. And once I lay out the facts, I'm through with it. I don't go home at the end of the night mad at you. I don't go home at the end of the night trying to figure out how to get at you, how to do things to disturb or destroy your program. I've dealt with that from people of color, black folks that are Democrats. And I don't agree with what they're doing, and I can give a good reason why. But you're not going to find me trying to destroy what you're doing just because I disagree with you.
Right. And what's that reason why you disagree?
Well, again, it's like the chickens coming home to roost. You're going back to Master's plantation. That's the way I look at it. That's exactly the way I look at it. Black folks are Democratic.
So you saying the Democrats are the coons, huh?
Yes.
Wow. Doc, go ahead and finish what you were saying. I think it was something that was moving. That's why I was making that noise.
Okay. All right. I didn't hear it. I'm going to do this piece, man, that we were trying to do last week and we couldn't work it out. And to some degree, it deals with what I think about Trump. And it's anybody who wants to vote for him, they can. But Greg Palast does a lot of good reporting. And I wouldn't just dismiss the whole theft piece. The Republicans really can't win if they don't cheat. And they are very willing to do that. But let me do this piece about Trump.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I don't generally write individual pieces. This dude is just so incompetent. And, his leadership skills are so I'm not, anyway, I'm going to do this piece. This is just about, I generally don't write pieces about individuals, but this dude's incompetence and silliness and dangerousness is just so monumental to me. And I'm not, I ain't attacking nobody because people are grown, they grown and they can do what they want to do. So that's cool with me. They can do what they want to do. I'm just not going to do it. But this is blood on his hands. Epic poem because there's so much that I could write. It's true it could go on and on and on, but I'll try to keep it real, real tight. The president's got blood on his hands and he won't even apologize. Too many people misunderstand. He ain't the antichrist, but he's the anti-wise. I used to speak of him in profanities. Now I just call him a disaster. I see he's drunk on all his vanities. Guess that makes him the anti-master. The president's got blood on his hands. He's trying to cover it up with lies. He thinks that we're too dumb to understand, tries to convince us not to trust our eyes. I used to marvel at his audacity, how he'd talk out of the side of his neck. But I've become numb to his mendacity, though he's still making the country a wreck. You see, he's flunking his test because he won't test us. He's flunking his test because he won't test us. See, he's the Wizard of Oz, the Emperor with no clothes. Good thing he ain't Pinocchio, or he'd trip over his nose. The president's got blood on his hands, not of his enemy, but of his countrymen. The president's got blood on his hands. I guess he's making America vulnerable again. The president's got blood on his hands. Much of it comes from his base. His anarchistic, narcissistic incompetence won't let him tell them to shelter in place. But still he reaches out to shake my hand and get angry when I won't take it. I'm tired of watching him barren the land. Now I just ain't gonna fake it. You see, he's flunking his test because he won't test us. Look at him, flunking his test because he won't test us. See, he's the Wizard of Oz, the Emperor with no clothes. Good thing he ain't Pinocchio or he'd trip over his nose. And so you say, what is this really about? It's time we voted him out. What's going to make millions of people shout is when we vote his ass out. And that's just basically dealing with him in this pandemic. That ain't talking about all the rest of the stuff he's doing. He has totally mishandled this. And you have studies that show had he acted correctly in ways that he still hasn't acted, perhaps 36,000 fewer people would have died. He's a disaster, man. And anybody, and like I said, it ain't personal. I don't dislike Warren. I think he's a sharp brother. We just disagree on this one. And I hear what he's saying about leaving the Republican Party, but it's just, if you with an abusive partner, sometimes you might ought to leave. And the Republicans really, they are doing a lot of things for rich people. They're doing the same kind of things for rich people that Warren is accusing the Democrats of semi-doing for us. In this country, the politics, you really don't need to be too tied to a political party or a politician. But you need to look at who's doing what and how it fits in with what you plan to do. And that's how you should decide who you should support. So, I just think Trump is a disaster. I think that Republicans are leaving the party. He's just incompetent, man. He's a bad businessman. He's talking about emotional. This dude is emotional, and he lies. If his lips are moving, he's lying.
Okay,
So,
wait what do you say to that, Brother Warren? You heard all that. That was a great poem, man. Great poem. I like it, man. It was deep.
Thank you. I can't wait till you can play it with the music with it.
Yeah. I don't know. Liked it. I don't know if Warren liked it, but you know what I'm saying. I definitely think that it was dope, man. How you put your creativity to talk about current events. Go ahead, Brother Warren. I'd like to hear your thoughts, and also I want to ask this question. Go ahead.
That's what I'm talking about. After we get through with our emotional ejaculation, and no offense, but I'm just the way I look at it. We don't sit down and we don't discuss the facts. You know, we have a bunch of emotions, but we don't discuss the facts. The First Step Act has benefited more African Americans than the 1994 crime bill that Joe Biden helped to create. And he hasn't tried to fix it. He hasn't tried to do anything toward the whole community of Black community that it completely destroyed and annihilated. And these are the type of things that I look at when I look at stuff like the First Step Act that was put in the act by Trump and African Americans. And then some people that get up even after you say that, oh, well, that was on a federal level. I don't care what we say. We're going to find a reason to not accept what it is. But even on the federal level, what it has done, it has set up a model for the state level. And as you know, one thing about this country, all you got to do is sit one thing in place and everything becomes a monopoly. Everything falls in place. I remember when the seatbelt rule wasn't but in one state. But now you can't drive in no state without having a seatbelt on because it set up a monopoly for everybody to follow that order. So when I look at stuff like the First Step Act, which has benefited African Americans and have loosed some of the restraints on the neck that has put Black people in prison up under the 1994 crime bill. When I look at stuff like that, when I look at the economy, how the economy has moved, and we would be in good shape if it wasn't for this pandemic, how we have moved, although I must admit, it was the first administration started it, but it was Trump's move after he took over that brought it to the height that it came to. So we were on a roll until this pandemic started. So when I look at those facts, when you start telling me about, and of course he has some faults, I'll be the first one to agree his morality level ain't that great. But I'm not concerned about his morality level. I'm concerned about what he's doing and the laws and things that are put in place that are benefiting me and possibly my people if they would open up their eyes and see. That's what has my attention.
Like I said, I'm not. Like I said, it's hard for anybody to be totally wrong. Yeah. This dude comes as close as you can be. But I ain't into ejaculation of no kind. And if you want to talk about this poem being emotional, then you need to break down the lines, brother, because the poem is hard-hitting, ass-kicking, telling what's really going on. So, you know, I ain't into emotional ejaculation. I believe in having sex. I ain't into masturbation on no level. I'm just, you know, and something was disaster. And look, I didn't say anything about his morality. I ain't talking about nobody's morality, right? Did I mention his morality?
Right. Well, I heard some things about him when you talked about him being narcissist and this and that. And hey, like I said, I would be the first.
But narcissism is not necessarily immoral, but home dude is incompetent and narcissistic and damn near anarchistic. And he got the Supreme Court looking like it did before 1954 in Brown, man. That's where he's taking it back to. So, but I'm not here to debate.
Yeah.
I guess they go do it.
I appreciate your perspective, and I think it's important, you know, to say this because Brother Warren is one of the strongest brothers I know. Because most brothers might feel the way he feels on some levels, but they're scared to say it, you know. And I know you told me this, Brother Warren, how people come up to you and they be like, "Thank you for saying this. I appreciate you. I agree with you," and all this other stuff. And then, you know, behind closed doors, they love you, and then they won't say nothing, you know, in the public. So I definitely want to say that. And I want to ask you this, Warren. When you listen to folks say, we're not for Biden, but we're definitely not for Trump, what do you say? How do you respond to them to get them to see that Trump might be, you know, something that they can consider?
Well, again, I like to look at facts. You know, I don't like to get off into emotions as to prime example. Even when Obama was the president, who've done the least amount for African Americans. But when you ask
Whoa,
people,
whoa. You say
yeah,
Obama the least amount.
who've done the least for African Americans. But when you ask people certain questions about why did you vote for Obama? Oh, I like his swag, how he walked across the White House lawn and how he did this. None of that had anything to do with presidency. Most of the things that I would hear. And I understand it. We were happy to have a black man in office. You know, I was happy. I have to agree. I voted for Obama the first term. But when it comes down to really understanding what these offices are about, I remove the color line. I remove the color line. I remove all that. And what I'm looking at is facts. And what the facts is what takes place. And these are the things that I explain to people. It's not about emotions. It's not about what I feel or what they feel. It's not about what they think or I think. This is about proven facts that can be researched and proven. And that's what anybody should go on. And so therefore, when you look at voting, voting is really a skilled art. Most people that vote, to be honest, don't really know what they're voting for. I've worked the polls, and I mean, some of the questions that people ask me, I be want to say, I can't tell them that, but I be want to say, what you doing here? Because I don't think you understand what you're doing. You know, so there were one time people were talking about taking away the electoral college and just going by the popular vote. The electoral college was put in place for a reason, you know, because
it was put in place for a reason. It was put in place to help southern states with smaller populations, smaller white populations, to deal with it. It was put in place so classes, white men could keep unclassed at that point in time white men from deciding who was going to be over it. It was put in place for a reason, and it needs to be removed for a reason. This is the only country in the world where you say, well, they won the popular vote.
Put in place.
They won the popular vote.
What you mean? Say that again.
When the electoral college was put in place, black people weren't even voting yet.
I said that, Warren. I just said that. It was put in place to keep non-landowning white men from deciding whom the leader would be. It was a classist move, and it was a move to help Southern whites who had fewer whites who voted, the same way the 3/5 clause was. So I'm not talking about black people wasn't voting. We didn't even have a country. We were citizens of no country when they did the Constitution.
We were prisoners of war. We were property, basically. And just to codify that, James Madison and his ilk, they weren't thinking about you, Warren, when they were writing the Constitution. They were thinking about you as property and how to deal with it.
No. They were thinking about us. They were thinking about writing about us in such a way so that people couldn't look at history and understand and see the cruelty that they had put in place. We all up in the Constitution.
Right.
We are all up in the Constitution. We are often not definitely, specifically said. The Second Amendment everybody goes on about was about us.
Correct.
Because they were afraid of us. We are all in the Constitution. But we are not oftentimes, sometimes we're not mentioned.
That's a great point. And I'm glad you codified that, because what I basically was saying was we weren't mentioned as what we needed to be mentioned, of course, as human beings, but they didn't even talk about us as slaves. They used like euphemisms, as you say, to make themselves look good in history. And the reason why I bring even that point up, and I see Warren, he's got something he's got to say. I'm going to get to him in just a second, but I really want to make sure that we know and understand that the first slave patrols or militias were against Native Americans and African Americans at that time, chattel slaves or property. Those were assembled to protect English settlers and other whites. And I think that that's something we have to really deal with and understand as we look at the Electoral College, as we look at representation, as we look at all the things that we see even today. Some of those remnants still remain, Warren, and the party that's closely aligned to that, in some people's eyes, and this is the question I'm asking you, do you think that the Democratic Party is closer aligned to the segregationists, to those that would demoralize and disenfranchise Do you think that Democratic Party is more aligned to those, or do you think that the Republican Party is more aligned to those in terms of policy and procedure and practice?
Well, let me see. Well, because I had something else on my mind. I want to answer that, but I want to go back to
go back to what you got, and then you can answer that.
Obadiah Kamal was saying, because I don't know if I totally agree with that about the Second Amendment and all that stuff being for us, because the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments knows the Bill of Rights was the protection of citizens against the United States government, because the citizens themselves had no.
We weren't in the amendments until the 13th. The first 10 amendments were for individual rights.
Right.
But the Second Amendment was about militias that were designed to keep us in line. The Second Amendment doesn't say all individuals, it deals with militias. See, people don't even know what this stuff says. And those militias were pulled together, not necessarily to stop and deal with the British. Hell, they wrote the Constitution after the war. So it wasn't about the British. The militias were about us and quote unquote Native Americans, wherever the hell America came from. The second amendment was about us, and it was about militia. The black man, the enslaved Africans are all through the Constitution.
Well, I mean,
but we just weren't always directly delineated. But the Constitution was written after the Revolutionary War.
Okay.
And the Second Amendment, the militias in the Second Amendment were about enslaved Africans and quote unquote Native Americans. See, this thing here, I mean, we just got to break it down. We can deal with America however we want to, but America is a gangster ass country. And if you want to prove it, read the Constitution. The gangsterism is all in the Constitution. In all the ways that they set up ways to steal a land, to steal a people.
Thank you for putting that on there.
I'm going to tell you that this was before, really political parties. This was about white men that could afford to leave their farms, leave their law practices, and go somewhere for 4 months. Everybody that was working on the Constitution was rich. There wasn't no poor white boys represented in the Constitution. So we can break it down. That's why they put the Electoral College in there, because it was a class act. It was about class.
Go ahead, Warren.
Now, Dr. Obadiah Kamal is saying that the Second Amendment, when it talks about a well-regulated militia, was against blacks and Indians. Now, out of my teaching, I've always been told that the first 10 Amendment was the protection of the citizens against the federal government. Now, what he just said, I've never seen, nor I've never read. But in looking at the Second Amendment as it reads, it says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to bear arms shall not be infringed. So from what I'm reading and what I see, it's still dealing with the federal government, because during that time, there was still argument about whether they should unite as a federal government or whether the states had states' rights to do what they wanted to do. So
that's why they gave them the 10th Amendment. That's why they gave the states the 10th Amendment. So it's just, and this is why we talk about facts and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes we don't always know the facts. And you can't read the Constitution as it's written, brother. You went to law school. See, I used to teach the U.S. Constitution. And when I was teaching in Denver, they sent a brother who was an attorney to come to my class to spy on me. And they did. I mean, it was all good. Homeboy, after I broke the Constitution down and started going through the first article with the House of Representatives and Congress and broke down why they dealt with the legislature in first and all of those things, after I started telling what the 3/5 clause was, and see, I would have to go back and really review that stuff, but I can break it down. First of all, the Constitution is one of the most demonically brilliant documents ever written.
Why do you say that, Doc? Why you got to break that
I'm
down?
saying because when Warren says, as I read it, but the Constitution was generally not written as I read it. The Constitution was written to hide certain political realities that were occurring in this colony into a country that was happening at that time. So they did, as you say, use euphemism. They never used the word slave, and that was the main generator of the economy of both the North and the South. But they never used the word slave. All other beings are 3/5. So you have to know some history and know what's going on to read that and know what it means. But you don't read the Constitution straight as it is written. You read some Charles Beard or some people who've broken the Constitution down and can go deeper into why a bunch of would-be capitalists wrote it the way they did.
Go ahead.
The Constitution is all about exploitation. I'm gonna tell you something else. The people in the Constitution that were dehumanized have done more to make this nation human than anybody who helped write that document. And another thing is that when they wrote the Constitution, they kept saying for the people, but that was a lie. It was only for certain people. The reason the Constitution has been expanded and the meaning has been applied to more than old rich white boys that wrote it was largely because enslaved Africans read for the people as I read it and believed it and fought to be a part of it.
Okay, go ahead.
But we weren't. But we weren't the first. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, or the quote-unquote Civil War amendments. Those were the first amendments that really were designed to do anything specifically for African people. Right. But there are a lot of places in the Constitution that were against that, even though it didn't specifically say
that
they were against.
Let Warren respond. Go ahead.
Let me ask you a question, Dr. Obadike. What was the first document that started this country? Let me ask you that. Do you know?
The Articles of Confederation.
No. The Constitution was not the first document. The Articles of Confederation was not the first document. Even the Declaration of Independence was not the first document. The first document that started this country was known as the Articles of Association. Go back and look at the Articles of Association, and that was the document that started to help push off the American Revolution because of the problems they were going through with the Crown. Okay? Right. If you read that document, they speak out because you had a split nation from its very foundation, from its beginning.
Absolutely.
Slavery was inherited not from the United States Corporation itself, but from Britain, from the Crown. It was established here. These people in the Articles of Association speaks out against slavery in the very first document that starts this country. So when I'm
gonna tell you something, Mark. Go ahead and
finish. These capitalists and these land developers who wrote the Articles of Association, who had a hand in the Constitution, it's very hard for me to think that they were writing things in there against me when it doesn't state that, when their problem was a federal government. That's why the Articles of Confederation didn't work, because all these states that were supposed to come together had their own laws and rules and did not come together. So the Articles of Confederation had to be broken down, and the Constitution had to be written and bring it up under a federal umbrella. And so as they talked about the rights of a militia and to bear arms to maintain a free state, because that was a big argument then. It wasn't about protecting yourself from blacks. So I just want to clear that up.
Warren, yes, it was. Now you can deny it all you want to, and you can talk about the Articles of Association or whatever other damn lies these rich ass white boys wrote against slavery. If they wrote something that was against slavery, why in the hell didn't they stop it?
You see, how long did slavery last?
I mean, let's just be real, brother. I can say I'm against. Let me see. I'm against adultery, but if I'm chasing women all the time, it don't mean a damn thing.
How
The
long does
Articles of
slavery last
Association.
in
Look,
the
in the
United States?
Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson was going to put something in the Declaration of Independence where they blamed slavery on England. They blamed slavery on King George. They made him take that shit out.
He did take
Because
that.
it was just a lie. And they might have had it in the Articles of Association, but if they had it in the Articles of Association and they meant it, then they should have stopped it.
Well, they
But
did.
they didn't. They
Yes,
kept
they
it
did.
going.
They
They kept it going for more than 100 years.
No, it
And
did not
part
last
of the
100 years.
Confederation
No.
won't
89
be
years
because
for the exact.
they let the each colony or state had its own currency. When they went and wrote the article, when they wrote the Constitution, said they didn't even let people know they were replacing the Articles of Confederation. They always been sneaky gangster.
Yeah,
You know, I ain't gonna go too far past
but I
the FCC.
did want to go back to Warren's point. And bringing all of that up about the article and all of this. So what you're saying is ultimately they did not want to infringe our rights, or what is your premise in bringing all of that? I just want to make
my
sure.
point is, he said that our Second Amendment, they were talking about the well-trained militia and the right to bear arms was against black people. That's not what the Second Amendment says. And what I brought out again is that if they were so much against black people, they wouldn't even spoke out against slavery and the Articles of Association. This country started split on the issue of slavery. It started split. You asked me if a country, which I think is great timing. I'm not saying we didn't suffer atrocities and we didn't suffer a lot in slavery, but 89 years after this country was established, slavery was abolished. The Republican Party was started in 1854 for the abolishment of slavery, which brought on a civil war and destroyed this thing called slavery from its physical entitlement or entanglement.
Water. Come on, man. Me and Warren share a birthday, said. Me and Warren share a birthday, said. But say it. Let me ask you. Say it. Let me ask you a question.
I'm listening.
When have white people ever gone to war to free us?
When did they do what?
When have white people in history ever gone to war to free us?
We just got to talking about the Civil War.
I know. And you said that they fought the Civil War to free the slaves. And that's one of the biggest lies. I didn't even think they were still telling that lie. They didn't go to the Civil War was fought to keep the Union together. Your boy Abraham Lincoln, who our people said they're so confused. That was the time.
Go ahead, Doc. Go ahead.
That was the time when we were naming our little boys Abraham left and right. And Abraham Lincoln didn't give a damn about us. I will say this, as far as we know, he never owned slaves, but he said his thing was keeping the Union together. He said, if I can keep the unions together and keep them enslaved, I will. If I have to free them, I will. They had to make him because the North was getting its butt kicked. They wouldn't even let us fight it first. And we were begging to. And then you got to remember that Abraham Lincoln bought Frederick Douglass and 9 other brothers there and said, look, we going to send you out to Haiti.
Yeah.
His brother said, man, they played Curtis Mayfield in the future. This is my country. He said Abraham Lincoln was trying to work on the logistics of putting us on another damn ship. That's why a lot of brothers don't even want to go on no program. But no, the Civil War was not fought to end slavery. The Republican Party did not come into being to end slavery. It just didn't. You know, now, as a result of the Civil War, we ended up being free. The Republican Party, if they would have kept up with Thaddeus Stevens and Charles Sumner, they might have been all right. They sold us out to get, what's that boy's name?
Lee Atwater?
No. I'm talking about after the Civil War.
Jefferson Davis and Andrew Johnson and
after Johnson.
Rutherford, Hayes and Rutherford.
The Hayes-Tilden Compromise.
Yeah.
We got sold out then. Just like we got sold out with the Hayes-Tilden Compromise. Before that, we just got sold for hundreds of years. Because we were enslaved before this became a country. We were enslaved before the Constitution. We were enslaved before there was a government that was not England. We were enslaved then. Man, said you didn't answer my question. When did white boys get together and fight for us? I don't remember that in history. So please.
You know what? I don't know of a particular time, a war, but I will give credit to John Brown. John Brown. Okay. I will give credit to John Brown, and that brother was a real one because they even tried to give him a chance to renege and repent. He said, "No, I'm going to the rest in peace before I allow something to happen in terms of slavery." So I will recognize that. Warren.
All right. But we got to go back to the 1800s to find what 14 or 15 white dudes. We got to go back to the 1800s to find 14 or 15 white dudes. Man, I just think about this, talking about they fought the Civil War to free the enslaved. Wait a minute, I just want to break something down that happened in the Civil War. At the Union and the Confederate were fighting, the blue and the gray, the North and the South, all that old silly stuff. At the end of the day, white Southerners would go to the Union line and take their enslaved African back. The person who started keeping the enslaved Africans was a general named Benjamin Butler. And Benjamin Butler said, we can't just, he said, as long as they have enslaved Africans, they can fight. They called us, it's another name for, I can't believe I can't call this. But but anyway, they said that they won us. They stopped white landowners from going and getting their enslaved Africans who were rushing to the Civil War, who were rushing to the Union Army camps, because like Warren, they were under the mistaken idea that they were fighting to free them. So they rushed to the Union Army camps, and the master could come to the Union Army camps at the end of the day and take his slaves back. Hey, man, all I know is that...
You mean to tell me that a whole Civil War was fought and slaves were freed after the Civil War because the Union and North wanted and they wasn't fought to free slaves?
No, they were not. They were fought to keep the South from starting another state. The South has started the Confederate States of America. They had their own president. Their president was Jefferson Davis. They had their own capital. Their capital was Mississippi. They fought the Civil War to keep the South from leaving.
Go ahead, Warren. Go ahead, respond.
Let me say this. The first thing I don't understand is why we feel that these people have. I don't care if Abraham Lincoln cared about black folks or not. I really don't care. But what I cared is that he knew what was the right thing to do. What is this? I can't think of this slave as much as I used to talk about this case, but this is the case that started the Civil War. The slave that out of St. Louis that was
Dred Scott.
The Dred Scott case is what started it was the horse on the camel's back that started the Civil War. What these people realized, whether it was for it didn't have to be about if it was financial and economic reasons, that's still good. This is a capitalistic society, and I enjoy capitalism and love it. What these people realized, we had one of the biggest slave uprisings in New Orleans. They don't talk about that. But these people knew that they could not continue to hold slaves. No way. The people that had sense, whether they loved black folks or cared about black folks or not, they knew this was an unholy institution, and it was not good for the country. So whether Abraham Lincoln loved me because I was black or not didn't matter. What he knew is this was not good for the Union. And if we continue slavery, we won't have a country. So the best thing we need to do is to abolish it. And so therefore, that was an avenue taken. The reason why I'm sitting here free today, the reason why I'm sitting here and I can enjoy capitalism today. Now, what we fail to realize, if we don't become accountable and responsible, and we keep pointing the finger and keep trying to find a way, we'll stay in our condition that we've been in. The chains have been physically away a long time ago.
The name of my show was Self-Determination for years. So I'm all about self-determination. But I do know when somebody owes me, I want my money. I do know when somebody has built an economy on my back and to their economy still largely is on my back, all you got to do is look at Ferguson, Missouri. Ferguson, Missouri criminalized black people so much that Ferguson, that the economy of Ferguson was once again based on black people. Because, you know, they had to change. They had to get the FBI to go in and change up the way Ferguson police did things. They had to change it up. They used to lose brothers in jail just like they've been doing in Harris County. So I'm not.
Well, Dr. Jamal,
I know how things are connected. I know that that we ended up getting emancipated because of the Civil War, but I know the Civil War wasn't fought to emancipate us. There are many things that happen as a result of an incident that incident was not necessarily designed for.
Got you. Warren, I want you to be able to respond to that. And then after answer this question, I think it's very important. Many people are considering the historic low unemployment rate for African Americans. They're looking at many of the promises that Trump has made, and they're saying he is making a concession to black people. And then on the other side of that, some people are saying it's all just politics. It's all just a dog and pony show like the rest of them. What do you say to those that question the sincerity of the Trump administration to reach out and put out that olive branch to black folk?
Based on facts again, as far as finances, economics, employment level, it's been the best for African Americans that it ever been in the history of this country. And in capitalism, in a capitalistic society, nobody's stopping you from moving ahead. You use your creative mindset and you make money. That's the beauty of capitalism. I have no problem with capitalism.
Okay.
You live, I mean, you have to deal with whatever economic system if you are living in, but capitalism is responsible for redlining. It's responsible for the desire to get rid of the union. This is what they call low road capitalism in this country when they start comparing it to some other capitalist societies across the world. This is low road capitalism. This is a capitalism that works, their incentive is pain and punishment rather than to incentivize you to reward. And capitalism does keep people from doing things. All you have to do is read The Half Has Never Been Told. Read when you find out how the segregated housing started and the role that the federal government had in it. And these in the archives, Warren, you know, you talked about facts. We talked about in the archive where they set up and specifically cut us out. Capitalism and government can do a lot of stuff. And for us to sit here and talk about it like it's equal or fair is
I've never said anything. Anybody who thinks anything is equal, something is wrong with their thought process. Nothing is equal. Nobody is equal. So I mean, even if you take the color line away, if you take the color line away, people will still find something else to be prejudiced about. So I'm not looking for a utopia in the sense of this party is oh so perfect. And so that's what people get into debates. It's like, okay, well, I'm listening to your conversation, and your conversation is that you're trying to find everything negative instead of the positive aspects of the situation we're in. So when I look at it that way, I begin to look at you because it's your negative mindset. Things first start with you. You have to first be accountable and responsible for yourself. People tend to treat you the way you treat yourself. People know who to mess with, and for whatever reason they mess with you, they know whether they can come at you a certain way or whether they can't come at you a certain way. And that's what people look at.
Right. And I wanted to ask you this because it's been in the news, and we know, what's going on in terms of our nominee for the Democratic Party. He has a very problematic history, and I think you have some issues with him as well in terms of is he the right candidate for our peoples and really for the country in that instance and matter. Can you speak to why you're not a Joe Biden fan, or why you're not going to vote for Joe Biden, even though he has to lift every voice, even though he has made some concessions? Of course, we all know about him saying you ain't black, but I'd definitely like to get your thoughts on that as well. But why are you not on the Biden train? Why have you abstained?
Two reasons, 2 or 3 reasons. And reason number one is his mouth. And since his career started in 1972, to even go back to that, to start from the ending and going back to the beginning, when he was on the Breakfast Club discussing the election or the runoff with Charlemagne the God, for him to tell him, well, if you, well, I tell you what, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black. Now, he tends to use it as it's supposed to be some kind of little crack, but what it says to me is that you're saying that black folks are not even good enough for you to give a decent answer. All you have to do is throw something out there like that, and then they're going to ride the train with it because they don't deserve to know your history or your facts, even which he's, you don't know me. Search my, come on, but he never really gave his history of the facts of his his time in the Senate or in the federal government. Joe Biden he's made comments. He's once called a state mandated school integration program the most racist concept you can come up with. And even referring to Barack Obama, when Barack Obama first got in office, he said he's the first sort of mainstream African-American who is articulate and bright and clean. So, sometimes you have to listen to what people say. They tell off on themselves with words. He was a staunch opponent for forced busing in the 1970s and leading crusader for mass incarceration throughout the 80s and the 90s, which, talking about the 90s, you have to look at the 1994 crime bill, which pretty much annihilated black communities that Joe Biden had a heavy hand in writing. Have Joe Biden come back and apologize or said anything about that crime bill, which locked up black men all over this country, which the 1994 crime bill promised to build more prisons? I think he even bragged about after the passing of the 1994 crime bill that there was now 60 new death penalties, 70 enhanced penalties, 100,000 cops, and 125,000 new state prison cells. This is what he bragged about. So when you ask me about Biden, if you don't know his history or what he stood for in the past, then you need to check his history out.
What about those that say Trump has just as much of a problematic and a deference to racist and segregationist like policies? They bring up the Central Park Five. They bring up many other the countless suits that he had with his apartments and his other rental properties, excluding and prohibiting African Americans specifically. What do you say to those that if you're going to say Joe Biden is problematic against black people, then the same can be said about Donald J. Trump?
Well, I don't know if I totally agree with that. I mean, of course, we do know the Central Park Five story, and there has been a few issues that has been raised on him. But overall, before Trump, you don't have these issues with him being an elected official. That's number one. And number two, before Trump became president, black folks pretty much loved and worshiped Donald Trump. They was hanging out with him at the Trump Towers. They was hanging out with him at the fights, at the Don King fights. They were rapping about him. They wanted to be millionaires like Trump. So all of a sudden, based on the things that have been put out by the other party to destroy his name, that's what a lot of this stuff is riding on. So if you look at
So you're saying that because they were hanging out with him at Trump Towers, because they were going to fights and events with him, then that means that he was somehow for black people or black people liked him.
Well, I mean, if you go back, there's a lot Trump has done, not only for blacks but for people in New York. If you go back and look at it, a lot of stuff that hasn't even been talked about. And it didn't matter that they were black. He's helped a lot of black folks even before he ran for president. Now, again, there are issues, and I have to admit there are issues that are questionable. But when you weigh them, I always do what's called a cost-benefit analysis. And when I'm dealing with a situation, I don't know which way to go. I draw a line in the middle of a sheet of paper, and I put cost on one side and I put benefit on the other. What is it going to cost me to go with this decision? And what is it going to benefit me to go with this decision? And then when I deal with that, whichever side outweigh the other is what gives me the decision to make my decision in the vote. What is it going to cost you to vote for Donald Trump? What is it going to benefit you? And whichever side outweigh the other, that's the side you take.
Well, give me the cost of voting for Donald J. Trump. What is the cost of voting for him?
Well, the cost is basically we still have to deal with his outlandish attitude, his somewhat immoral stands at times, the things that he say, because they can be off the wall. That's mostly only the cost that I see. But as far as benefits, as I look at it, you can look at better economy. You can look at that. To me, that wraps it up in a nutshell. Finance, economy. The First Step Act has benefited African Americans as they've taken a band off prison and set a model for the states as well.
What would you say to those that say the First Act is really just a ploy or a proxy to be able to open up private prisons and to enfranchise corporations into having more control over federal entities such as prisons and the like?
For those who would say that, I would ask, based on what proof are they basing that on? In my opinion, the penitentiaries that hold prisoners from state or federal should have never been private institutions. Never been private institutions. But see, now you're going back to the 1994 crime bill, which the Democrats wrote, which helped to push these private prisons and guarantee these people who are owning these prisoners more prisons and more profit. So when you have a school to prison pipeline and prisons that's open to guaranteeing more profit, then that's what you're asking for. You're building a situation for that to occur. But if you shut that down and you focus on the state running the prisons as the way as it should be, then we kind of close that problem up. So I don't know. They would have to kind of tell me the reason as to why they feel that way.
Okay. Well, the information is out there. It's definitely been reported that there are some private interests that will be involved in some of these actions and activities. But one of the things I did want to ask you is, in terms of something you've been talking about the economy. Do you think that Donald J. Trump can bring this economy back to record levels? Do you think he has? Because many people have reported that there was complete incompetence, which led to, as Doc mentioned, around 36,000 reported deaths that could have been prevented had there been earlier action from the administration. Do you think someone who has showcased, with the lack of PPE in the initial stages, with the lack of real guidelines and real focus and structure on meeting this pandemic and putting out the appropriate message, do you think someone who has, in many people's opinion, laid an egg and created a debacle in which many of us, we don't go outside without a mask on our face and, without all of these other things that we call social distancing and all of these things. So how do you compartmentalize and process the fact that our lives are changed right now and many are blaming Donald J. Trump because of his lack of activity and incompetence that
our lives are not changed because of Donald J. Trump. Our lives are changed because of what happened in Wuhan, China. That's why our lives have changed. Something has been released upon the environment. Now, again, we are all entitled to make mistakes. That's going to happen. And I do know when you're a president and you're in a position of leadership, your job is to make less mistakes as possible. And so, I don't know, Trump was kind of like under the impression that I was up under. I haven't worn a mask not one day. Well, I did yesterday because I was forced to wear a mask to go into a store. But other than that, I haven't worn a mask not one day since this pandemic. And one of the reasons why I didn't is because if the American people were well-versed and educated, I didn't believe the information either, because the first information is that you don't tell me a virus, which only does not even exist long outside of the host. You're not going to tell me that that virus is in the air 10, 12, 13, 14, 2 and 3 weeks. That makes no sense. It makes no sense at all. Now someone coming back and say, well, it's not a virus, it's a bacteria. So Trump had his doubts about it, as well as I had my doubts about it, because that's not the way a virus acts. A virus, if that's the case, we'd all be dead from AIDS. We could just sit AIDS on the desk and let people come back and touch it. But once AIDS get out of the body, out of the host, which is a virus, it dies. So somebody been lying about this thing, this whole virus thing, and then they want to turn around and say, well, Trump is not responsible. He may have made a poor decision based on what the information that he had. So that's my take on that.
But what about the reports that say they had people who came to the administration in January and let people know in the administration that there were some concerns about Wuhan? There was a potential virus that had been contracted or could be potentially contagious. What do you say to those that say, because of the messages he was sending, talking about there would be no major widespread contamination, there would be very few cases, this would be over in a matter of days? How do you process that and say he deserves another 4 years based on that? And not only that, but numerous occasions such as Charlottesville and many other instances in which his impulsive and very erratic behavior and emotions maybe led him to say and do things that he had to later retract.
Well, my statement of saying he deserves another 4 years is not just based on the pandemic. Again, it goes back to the cost-benefit analysis of the whole term. And a lot of times we may make our choices based on the last thing that happened. But when we look at the overall picture, I would believe he deserves another 4 years based on the economy, based on the First Step Act. Yes, he deserves another 4 years. If the pandemic, we wouldn't have this pandemic problem, we would actually still be skyrocketing. The economic will still be skyrocketing. And even though through this, I believe we're set up for a great comeback. One of the biggest things we have going on right now, and that's the creativity of the people. People had to figure out ways to supplement the income that they weren't getting. So right now, home-based businesses is going off the chart. People are getting involved, which I myself have gotten back involved into the foreign exchange market and trading currencies. So there's ways to get around the situation if you put your head on and think. But if you're sitting back waiting for the government, as a lot of us have been told, what are we going to do? Then you're not going to make it. So you got to have that independent mindset, and that's the mindset of our party, is to stay independent.
Do you think there are more Black people gravitating to the Republican agenda? Do you think more Black people are being inclined to listen to the policy of those of the conservative ilk? Do you think that there is a resurgence into the Republican Party, or do you think you're a part of just a small cabal?
No, I do believe that a lot of people are opening up and listening, because if you finally sit down and you just look at the facts, and it's not based on what Warren Houston thinks, what he heard, what he feels. If you sit down and look at the facts, and a lot of people, this new generation, they're opening up. They have an open mind to hear what's going on and to look and research history. And when you see it, it is what it is. And so people are. And the matter of fact, like, again, there are people who come up to me who like to stay in the dark because they're scared. I can't say this openly because I'm going to be mistreated, and that's true. I've had to experience it, but it's all good. I'm going to be me,
That's powerful. Definitely. How can people reach out to you to find out more information? Because I know that there might be someone that's saying, man, you crazy as hell, man. I can't believe you would even, say these things. I got to find out where you're getting this information from. Or it might be somebody saying, hey, I want to learn more. I want to hear more, because this is a very pivotal election. And I know some people out there saying, why you have this Negro on here talking about Trump? But I think that because we live where we live and the times in which we're living, and we need to be able to hear as much information as possible. So I'll just be honest with you, man. I'm not a Trumper. You know what I'm saying? This is not me, but I do understand the power of being able to stand in your square and be a man and say what you need to say. And also, I think we do need to be more strategic. I do think we do need to make sure that we're putting out the best possible plan. And I love how you talked about cost and benefit, right? You know, what it's going to cost and what are our benefits. Because one thing's for sure, we can no longer allow ourselves to be exploited. We can no longer allow people to take us for granted. And we can no longer be used as pawns and cogs in people's games. So whatever is going to be able to empower us and to no longer allow us to be disenfranchised, I think we do have to at least listen and heed the wisdom that could possibly come from that. So I definitely love for you to give your information, let people know how they can find out more about what Warren Houston is doing, and then maybe see how they can learn some of these things that you've been sharing for this hour.
Well, you know, let me say this first and I get the information. I want my brothers and sisters, and I'm talking to African Americans respectfully. My mentor told me this, and I've shared this story before. And I realized that it was true when I first started on working on my law degree. He said, by the time you finish this degree, when you finish this degree, I want you to be very careful in how you handle your family and friends. And so my question, I asked him, why did you say that? He said, because they're going to sound like idiots to you. And when he first said that, I said, what do you mean they're going to sound like idiots to me? But by the time I finished law school and I got my master's in law, I understood very much what he meant. Law school teaches you to be a stoic. It teaches you to step outside of your emotions and review the facts. And upon reviewing the facts, to be able to make a conscious decision on the facts that you've reviewed. And we as Blacks, as African Americans, we suffer from not using logic in a sense that it needs to be used. We're very emotional, highly emotional people. So when somebody comes along with a different viewpoint or different thought than we are accustomed to, then we automatically take defense. We overtalk them. We don't listen. We don't give them room because we don't want to hear it. And we have to ask ourselves, why is that? Because if you're really secure in the information that you have, you can stand to listen to somebody else, whether you agree with them or not. You won't take it personally. You won't get upset. You won't want to get ready to fight because they said something that you disagree with. So this is the only way we're going to be able to deal with the facts, is that we step out of our emotions and be able to hear other points of views and understand, or try to understand, why is a person thinking that way? Because one of the most powerful things that we have on this planet is the mind. And the mind is a terrible thing to waste. So with that being said, we're about to start the Know Thyself Radio Network show up at the end of June. The last Sunday this month will be on every Sunday night at www.knowthyselfradio. That's KNOWTHYSELFRADO, knowthyselfradio.net. Because we believe in Know Thyself Radio, you can't know man until you know yourself. You can't know God until you know yourself. You can't know the world until you first know yourself. So it starts with the man in the mirror. And also, you can reach me. I guess I'll throw it out there. You can also reach me by phone at 346-217-0595, 346-217-0595. And I'm on Facebook, Warren Houston. And we also have a page on Facebook, the People's Law Study Group. I am the founder and the creator of the People's Law Study Group, where we gave judicial classes. We did that for 2-3 years straight over at the Shrine every Saturday, educating the community on the judicial system. And the reason why I did that, and I took the initiative to do that, is because I believe that after going to law school and understanding the law, is that the main reason that Black folks suffer so much in the judicial system not was because they were Black, but because they were ignorant of the law. And so I wanted to change that by taking the ignorance of the judicial system away, that we understand the policies and the procedures and have something else to fight with.
You know, you mentioned that. I did want to ask this question. How do we approach police brutality? How do we attack, if that is a word to use, or how do we diffuse police brutality so that we can protect ourselves and our family? I'd love to get your thoughts, because you've always had a very interesting perspective on how we address this this thing that is ravaging, some would say, in the form of almost like a internal or domestic pandemic for our communities in and around America. How would you begin to respond to it, and what would you do to address it if you were given the opportunity to do such?
Okay, the statement that I'm about to make, George Floyd incident, is an exception to the rule. So I am not applying this to the George Floyd incident. I am just as upset or angry or outraged by what happened up there in Minneapolis, Minnesota, as every African American around the world, because that was not called for. George Floyd himself was apprehended. He was handcuffed, and there was no reason for the police officer to put his knee on his neck for over 9-10 minutes till he took the man's life. And so sometimes, in my opinion, we have to overstep boundaries of what the law is supposed to be to make changes. But based on any regular situation, a regular stop, we have to use intelligence in that stop, because some people will jump up and say, well, I know my rights. The moment you tell a police officer you know your rights, he know that you don't know. Because if you knew
explain, what do you mean by that?
Well, if the police is violating you, if you know your rights, you're not going to stand there and argue with him. You're going to continue to let him violate you. And at the proper time, you will know how to go through the proper channels and file what you need to file against that police officer. So I would never, and again, I tell people, regardless of what the law may say, you have to use intelligence in the situation. This person is human just like you. The police officer that stopped you may have just gotten divorced from his wife, whom he loved 30 years, and just might caught her cheating with somebody else. And so he's already angry. He stopped you, and he's taking that frustration out on you, and you're giving him what he wants, and then he flips out, and then there you have a situation. So even though I may be in my proper right to do something, it doesn't necessarily mean I have to do it because I'm in my proper right. Because once you are dead, then you may be right, but you're dead right. And we can't change that. We can't bring you back once you're dead. So you have to use the proper channels. And there are things that I explain to people that people don't know. One thing that's happened in this George Floyd case is that it's going to go back before the Supreme Court about concerning the immunity that the police have enjoyed. They may not be enjoying that immunity much longer because this was an outrage and it made no sense at all. But all police officers are bonded. Okay. And this is something that most people don't know or haven't even been told. And so therefore, if you're injured by a police officer, then why not go to the risk management department and find their bond and file an insurance claim against the bond? Anybody ever thought about that? Nobody talks about that. And anybody know anything about insurance is that you get too many hits to that bond and you become uninsurable. Guess what? You have no job. And so this is what I talk about when I talk about wisdom and knowledge. There are ways, things around that if we become more engrossed in wisdom and knowledge as opposed to just reacting out of emotions, we'll never get anywhere with that.
Okay. So you're saying that our actions and activities need to be very refined and logical in how we deal with the police. Yes. That we need to understand the law, not just tip off and run our mouths and say that, but really know it and then exercise it in an effective way. Now, some people would say to that, so you're putting all the onus on the citizen, not the trained and expected public servant. What would you say in response to that? Do you feel that the onus is on us or is it on the government official?
Again, why was the Constitution written? To protect the citizen from the government. So now if you're telling me the Constitution was written in the late 1700s, that they didn't have any trust in government then, why are we trusting government now? That's the question I ask people all the time. If those 10 amendments were put in place to protect the citizen from the government, then why are you trusting government now? Most police stops, when police stop you, a lot of times they're looking for drugs. Police deal with criminal activity. So that's why a lot of times people are surprised when they have a debate with their landlord over some payments or, wife, or they splitting up and somebody call it, well, he taking, they say this is a civil matter. This is not a criminal matter. So if that's all if operating in the criminal sense, then like some have experienced in the past, some people have even allowed because they're thinking from a morality standpoint and not a legality standpoint. This is what I explain to people. There's difference between morals and legality. Most Black people and most African Americans, we are of a sense of a moral people. So we expect police and everything to be moral. That's not always the case. So a lot of times there has been incidents where brothers have allowed police officers to search their car because they feel like, oh, I don't have anything in it, so why should I? The next thing you know, a bag comes up and says, what's this? And he's looking like, what are you talking about? But you allowed that as opposed to knowing legality and knowing the law and say, wait a minute, you're going to have to get a search warrant. Something, well, getting a search warrant makes me look guilty. Not necessarily so. You know, I think that was, I can't think of the comedian say, would you rather look guilty and free, or would you rather look innocent and in jail? So I think I'd rather look guilty and free.
Yeah, definitely, man. Well, we definitely have to continue this conversation because I think it's important for us to contextualize all of these things that you've been talking about in terms of the information we need to know. And I do think we need to be very vigilant, but at the same time, understand how to use that vigilance in a way that's intelligent and in a way that will not allow Gestapo-like and very brutal tactics to be used upon us. And sometimes, we just have rogue officers, right? But I think that if we are able to use some of the things that you've been mentioning, and I appreciate you for sharing them, and the wisdom to be able to refrain from physical and power struggles with them, right? Because we know our police officers have been militarized, right? Yeah. We know that they have been militarized. So they will extract maximum force on those that they come in contact with, especially from darker hues and more disenfranchised communities. So I think it's important that we have this discussion. I'd love to bring you back to talk about some tools and techniques and best practices that we can use and utilize to keep ourselves safe.
Can I make one more statement?
Yeah, go ahead, bro.
To get the people to understand my thought process. At the turn of the century in the early 1900s, you had two black men who were the most famous men in America. And one of those men were known as Booker T. Washington, and the other one was known as W.B. Du Bois.
Right.
If you talk to some people today, some people would actually call Booker T. Washington a coon. And a lot of times I get very disturbed when I hear that, and that's because of his speech known as the Atlanta Compromise.
Right.
But I look at Booker T as one of the most educated, intellectual man of the 20th century, because what he understood is what W.B. Du Bois did not understand, who was his nemesis and who was pushing people off into politics. Booker T. Washington said, man, let them have all of that. What he wanted black folks to do was to become independent and self-sufficient. And he understood that was the only way to break the bonds of slavery, is that once you can stand up on your own feet as a man and be respected as a man and be respected as a human being, no matter what anybody else say or think, they're going to have to give you the respect you deserve. And he knew that took time. You're talking about 50 years out of slavery. And right now today in 2020, there's an institution that Booker T. Washington started in Tuskegee, Alabama, called Tuskegee University, that's still standing, still educating African Americans today. Now I have to ask you, where is W.B. Du Bois' legacy as of today?
Well, I mean, that's kind of rough. Come on, man. He wrote the souls of black folks, and he's done some major intellectual things. And even when he went to Ghana, because he was basically exiled or repatriated there, he still was doing some masterful and very amazing intellectual works. So I kind of got to push back on that, but I understand your point. Your point is that Booker T as an institution that is still supporting and specializing in advancing African Americans, particularly, and others as well, because the population is not just African American there. But it is a very powerful entity, and I think that that is a very good point to bring up. You're going to come back, brother, and we'll delve into that even further in detail and degree. I know you got everybody excited, and I definitely want you to let people know how they can reach out to you again.
All right. Again, the last Sunday, I think it's 29th, 30th. I don't have a calendar. For all of you who do know, I am the host of the Know Thyself Radio show at knowthyselfradio.net. We will be returning to the air on the last Sunday in June, knowthyselfradio.net. That's no, K-N-O-W, no, not N-O, but K-N-O-W, no, thyself, T-H-Y-S-E-L-F, radio.net. That's right. Every Sunday night at 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern, and 7 p.m. Pacific, Mountain, and 6 p.m. Pacific. So we'll be returning there. You can meet us there. We have a page on Facebook, which is the People's Law Study Group. You can find us and like us on that page and reach out to us. We'd be glad to talk to you.
Most definitely, man. Take care. Much respect.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure being on.
Absolutely. This is the kind of conversations we have to get it out there and let the people decide. You know what I'm saying? You already know, man. Take care. As we get ready to close out, we want to talk about police brutality and give solutions. You know, many of us have seen the tears, I've seen the fears, I've seen the worries, I've seen the doubt, I've seen all the pain and frustration, and I've seen people seek fame. And I definitely have to say this, you know, for someone not to address this, for someone not to talk about this, for someone not to say anything, and then purport themselves to be a leader, purport themselves to be an influencer, comport themselves as someone of a public figure, and you don't have anything to say about what's going on and transpiring right now, you can't use the excuse of being an ostrich. No, we don't need you to have your head in the sand. We need to have your head focused on giving us either information, making quality commentary and evaluation and analysis, or saying something that's relevant, because you cannot continue to exploit the people. 2020, I think, is about clear vision, not perfect vision. Many people have misinterpreted that to mean that it's going to be a perfect vision. No, 2020 means that it's normal, that you see as it actually is. And I think that's what time it is in this country, is to see what things actually are. And I just want to close out because we have a lot of people who are taking advantage of opportunities to exploit their platforms or to promote their agendas. But I think the most important thing is to focus on the well-being of the people and to concentrate on things that are workable and things that are feasible and things that are not only accessible, but are capable of making the change necessary that we need to see in our reality. And especially with police brutality, we need to begin to have not only community-led review boards, but they need to have hiring and firing power. And also the community needs to be able to evaluate the responsiveness and the effectiveness of their police departments. There needs to be a database that has and compiles all this information so that when someone is shot, that information doesn't get pushed under the rug and doesn't get dismissed. No, it goes into a computer file or a database that we can begin to compile and see patterns. We need to have racial bias testing, not only training and skill set education, but testing to see and then evaluate through surveys that we have in the community to see what officers are violating the rights of citizens. See, this is now high time. Those of you who have been asking what you should do, because many people have been asking all of our guests that we had on tonight. We want to say thank you so much. And they've even asked me. What I say is you do what you do and you do it better than you've ever done it before. And you begin to remember those that are disenfranchised. You begin to support those that have been oppressed, repressed, suppressed, and depressed by this society and others. And then you begin to address those issues right where your address is in your locality. We want you to think globally and act locally. So we need to see folk not only call Minnesota DA, not only call the DA in Georgia, but call your local DA and say to them no longer the practices of exploiting and perpetrating the worst kinds of inactions and inactivity toward people in minority communities. Because I guarantee wherever you are listening, wherever you are watching me, there is a community of melanated people suffering from disenfranchisement and missing the mark on so many opportunities that they could exist in and are not privileged to. So I think it's important for us, before the trend ends and people start posting, which will come in a couple of days, but for us to focus on for the rest of our days to make this not only a more equal society, but a more equitable society. And that's going to require people to make sacrifices, to speak out, and to say it honestly and truly as it is, without fear and worry of reproof or repercussions, because human life is more important. And it's a shame, because I've talked to folk who said, no, I don't want to talk about this issue because it might hurt my brand. Or no, I can't say that because it might offend those who support my endeavors. And they're entitled to their perspective. And I'm not here to disparage, but I am here to say that if you call yourself a spiritual leader, if you call yourself a master teacher, if you call yourself someone that the people can call upon, and you ask them to call upon you to buy your crap, if you have the gall and the audacity to do those things, then you should have also the integrity, sagacity, tenacity, and intensity to step out and say something that's not mendacious, but that's truthful and honest, that will help the people move forward and to do something constructive and productive and meaningful in the lives of others. Now, we say all these things, knowing and understanding there are going to be some even more difficult times to come. We have estimated some 75,000 people will die from despair, courtesy of coronavirus. Many of the doctors are talking about the second wave is coming in June. And there are reports that the homeless rates will be exorbitant over the course of this virus and the after effects. But one thing I do know is this, is that we've been through difficult times before, and we will get through this time. And it will take each and every individual making sacrifices, holding themselves accountable and responsible to one another, each other, and remembering that teamwork makes the dream work. And we know and understand how important it is for us to get our mind right, for us to focus on things that are right. And I know, because our dear friend Les Brown has said, it takes 17 times. It takes 17 times seeing something positive. It takes 17 times seeing something positive to remove the negative that you have seen. And we have seen thousands of negative things over the course of this last week. Many of us have seen a man die. A man literally die before our eyes. And then hear reports about that death was influenced by pre-existing conditions, almost negating the 8 or 9 minutes that his ability to breathe was restricted. This is the reality that we are suffering from, because we have people, entities that are promoting an ideology of separatism and racism. And we have to begin to work together collectively and constructively to ward off the evil and the negativity, and to begin living out the creed that this nation was established on. And we know that the Constitution didn't have folk of my ilk in it initially, but fortunately, it is a living document, and it has been breathing closer in degree and distance toward the real essence and freedom that we as human beings must exist in. And that's liberty, right? That's justice. And that's the pursuit, hopefully, of life and happiness. And that's what we want for you. And that's why we're striving to do this show. Continue to support each and every individual, from Ashton to Brother Gary, to Sister Secunda, to our dear brother, Dr. Kamal, and our wonderful human being and amazing brother, attorney Warren Houston. And also support those brothers and sisters that you are closest to, whether they live in this city or any other city or anywhere else. If you see them doing something constructive, if they're doing something positive, if they're doing something productive, give them a like. Text them, tell them how much you appreciate and like what they're doing. Let's begin to ward off the negativity, because as Les Brown said, it takes 17 times seeing something positive to ward off and destroy one negative thing that you see. It takes 17 times. So that's why we want you to get your mind right and focus on the positive. Now, many people have confused what positive means. If you look up the philosophical etymology of the word positive, it means knowing and understanding the facts. It's not living in some fantasy of optimism or some delusion running from the problem. No, it's facing it as it is and embracing the realities that exist. And it's having not only the hope for something better, but doing something better to make a change that's better for those to come. So we want you to come to the point to where, as you look at the screen, tap into the show next week. And also, if you want to read this wonderful book that we are so happy and privileged and pleasure to be a part of, I want to read a little bit of it because we finally got it. It finally came in. This is the first copy, and those that ordered, you'll get yours this weekend because the final shipment will be in. And there's not many left if you want a copy. I'm not trying to sell it like that. I'm not trying to hustle you, but there's very few copies left, and it's an amazing book. They even put some color pages in it, and I'm trying to get to one that I can show you right now. But this is all about love and positivity. So we'll close out the show with a good word, hopefully, and something that'll be meaningful to you. To supply human needs and ever expand our understanding of reality is the basic function of the universe. Don't stress, but stretch your mindset to think calmly and carefully. Raise your consciousness. Listen quietly to the deep reserve of goodness and great guidance that resides within you to help, heal, and inspire you. Definitely. That's what we're striving to do each and every Sunday. We're given the privilege, pleasure, and honor to come give you this information. We'll close with that and say we love you, and there's nothing you can do about it other than loving on somebody the way that hopefully someone loved on you and gave it to you freely. And all they asked was that you give it unto someone else the same. So let's continue to keep moving forward. Peace and blessings. It's been said. You tapped into the conscious mindset. Please make sure you check out Brother Gary's show. Please make sure you support Ashton and all of the other wonderful activists that are doing some phenomenal things in the community and bringing a lot of light and love all around the world. Peace and blessings.